Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kyuubi gives Naruto a Kekkei Genkai part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The Kyuubi. See. Hold the line. The yondaime is here. Minato, don't. Shiki Fujin. Sarutobi was snapped out of his thoughts by a knocking at his office door. The old man heaved a heavy sigh as he pushed himself out of his chair. He glanced out of what was left of the office wall towards the remains of Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves. Huge pillars of black smoke rose up into the night sky, blocking out the twinkling stars. Fire and screams raged through the streets as ninja ran to and fro, trying to save as many lives as they could. The stench of death hung in the air like a shroud, gagging the throats of even the most hardened veterans. "Come in," he called as he turned towards the door. The door opened and in poked the head of Yuzuki Yugago, a newly promoted chunin. She looked exhausted and tired and her arm was in a bloody sling. "The council has convened as you ordered, Hokage-sama." She bowed before closing the door again, returning to her post. He sighed as he picked up the red and white tri-point hat of the Hokage and placed it on his head. He should be retired, damn it, not taking up a job he gave up over 5 years ago when he got too old to carry out his duties. As he walked to the door, his eyes were drawn to the shadowed portrait of the man who should be wearing the hat and taking charge, Namikaze Minato. The spiky-haired blonde had been Sarutobi's chosen successor to the mantle of Hokage. The famed Konoha's Yellow Flash, and the hero of the Third War, Minato was loved by all in the village. The man was often coined a once-in-a-generation genius, a title well-earned. His works in jutsu, seals, tactics, and politics were nothing short of masterpieces. He was fair, caring, noble, compassionate, and more. He was truly a ninja beyond compare. At least, when he was alive. That all changed 11 hours ago. Because 11 hours ago, disaster struck Konoha. Kyuubi no Kitsune, the nine-tailed fox. The very name instills fear and dread in the hearts of those that hear it. And it was 11 hours ago when the demon fox attacked Konoha. There was no warning or provocation in the attack. One moment all was peaceful, then the next the main gate was destroyed in a cloud of fire, the Kyuubi following behind. Attacks were ineffective against the creature, and there was no way to draw its attention away from the village. All hope was lost. Or so they thought. It was Minato who came up with the plan to save the village, once again living up to his title of genius. The plan was to seal the beast within a child whose umbilical cord was freshly cut. This idea didn't appeal to Sarutobi. Hosts for demons, Jinchuriki, live terrible, isolated lives, and the idea of doing that to a newborn, or anyone else for that matter, sat ill with the old Kage. Sarutobi pleaded and begged Minato to reconsider, but the yondaime couldn't be swayed, convinced that it was the only option to save the village. Sarutobi reluctantly agreed and watched as his student left to battle the Kyuubi, a small bundle in his arms. After the battle, it was Sarutobi who retrieved the child and saw firsthand as the Kyuubi marked the babe as his. On each cheek, 3 small, thin, black marks appeared on the young boy's face, bleeding slightly, and his stomach an intricate seal pulsed red in time with the boy's heartbeat. As Sarutobi picked the small bundle off the ground, he gazed in immense sadness at the small child as he realized the momentous change that just befell the boy, only for his eyes to widen in shock as the blanket fell away to reveal a small shock of neon yellow hair. He wouldn't have, Sarutobi could remember thinking, only for his assumptions to be proven correct as the child's eyes opened to reveal the largest and brightest pair of cerulean blue orbs he had ever seen except on one other person. Comprehension hit him like a kick to the nuts. Minato had used his own son for the sealing. Sarutobi had sworn up a storm in his mind, thrice cursing his successor-turned-predecessor to the deepest pit of hell for the trouble he heaped onto the worn old man's shoulders. This small child, barely a few hours old, was now the Jinchuriki for the strongest of the Bijou, the heir of the yondaime, son of Awa's bane, most likely the godson of his old pupil, Jiraiya, and if what Minato had said earlier was true, an orphan with no family whatsoever. And now he was going to have to explain all of this to the council. Damn you, Minato. I call this council to order. Sarutobi banged his gavel on the desk, immediately silencing the chatter as the Konoha council took their seats. The 7 ninja, 7 civilians, 3 elders and 1 Hokage lowered themselves into their seats tiredly. It had been a long day. So Sarutobi began, finding absolutely no idea of how to begin this discussion. Any questions? He immediately regretted it as he was bombarded from all sides with queries before he banged his gavel again. One at a time. Nara Shikaku stood, his face bearing new scars that would remain with him for the rest of his life. Well, we all know that the Kyuubi attacked, but not why. We know that the Yondaime was seen going to and from the village during the battle and that he fought the Kyuubi atop Gamabunta before there was a flash of light and both the Kyuubi and Minato died. He hesitated a bit at the end as it was still hard to accept. He and Minato had been in the academy together, and he considered the blonde one of his closest friends. Still, he pushed on. So the best question I can think of is, what happened? There were murmurs of assent from the other council members as Shikaku took his seat again. Sarutobi nodded absent-mindedly. It was a good question, and would make things go quicker with any hope. He cleared his throat and got the others' attention. Well, I think that it is time to bring in someone who will make things become a lot clearer. He made a come-hither motion with his arms, and from the shadows stepped the form of a 14-year-old Hatake Kakashi. The young Mumbu captain stepped forward, holding a bundle in his arms which he deposited in front of Sarutobi before spinning in his heel and walking from the council chambers without so much as a backward glance. Sarutobi frowned. It seemed he would need to have a talk with the boy. He didn't want him to start thinking of the child of his teacher as a demon. He was brought out of his thoughts by a happy gurgling sound, and his gaze was drawn to the young boy in front of him who had his chubby little arms outstretched in an attempt to reach Sarutobi's hat. He smiled as he let the boy grab one of his fingers. The kid had a strong grip. Hokage-sama, what has the child got to do with any of this? Uchiha Fugaku asked, his face twisted in confusion as he looked at the boy. Sarutobi discreetly placed a genjutsu over the child to put him to sleep. He had a feeling that things were going to get loud and a crying newborn wouldn't help anyone's mood. This child, Fugaku, is the reason that the Kyuubi isn't attacking anymore. The Inuzuka matriarch, Tsum, correctly summed up everyone's thoughts with a very intelligent, "Say what?" Sarutobi smiled at the young clan head. "I mean what I say, Tsum-chan. This little boy stopped the attack." His old teammate, Koharu, spoke up after a few moments of stunned silence. "I think it would be best if you started from the beginning, Hiruzen." Sarutobi sighed as he began. "It was during the 10th hour when Minato came to me with a plan. He proposed that he could seal the Kyuubi permanently and stop the attack. The drawback of this was that the jutsu required to seal the beast was a suicide jutsu. I asked him what talisman or pendant would be strong enough to hold the greatest of the bijou, and he told me that no inanimate object could contain the monster's power, and that to use an animal would have run too great a risk of demonic possession. He told me that the demon would have to be sealed within a person for it to work. I offered myself as the sacrifice, but he shook his head. He told me that the demon's chakra would meld with that of the host over the course of the person's life and that when they died, they would take the Kyuubi with them. In order for this to work, the person would have to be young enough for their body to accept and adapt to a secondary chakra. I asked who would be young enough, and he told me that it would have to be a child, no more than a few hours old." Many eyes widened as the ramifications hit them, but it was Yamanaka Inoichi who spoke up. "You mean?" Sarutobi threw back the child's blanket to expose the seal on the child's belly, now only glowing with a dull red, almost black, light, and the whiskers. Many jumped back in fright, while others gave the babe uneasy looks, and a few examined the seal with fascination, having never seen one of its complexity before. "This young boy is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi." Sarutobi watched their eyes as his words sunk in. Some appeared too shocked to absorb this, while others just stared at the child with disbelieving eyes. It was the others that Sarutobi kept his eye on. The ones that appeared disgusted by the boy, their faces twisted into angry grimaces as they glared at the baby with hate-filled eyes. He memorized the names of each and every one of them, adding them to his mental shit list of possible troublemakers. After almost 5 minutes, the silence was broken by Kuchisito, the master of the treasury. "So what are we going to do with it?" he asked, crossing his arms and leaning back in his chair as he glared at the babe. Sarutobi leveled a slight glare at the civilian. "We are not going to do anything to him, Sito-san. He will either be placed with an adoptive family or in an orphanage until he reaches the age of 8, when he will choose to either join a civilian school or attend the academy." Sito looked at the Hokage incredulously. "You can't seriously be considering to let this thing go near the general population? It's not safe." Sarutobi's retort was swift. "Minato's seal means that the Kyuubi is permanently sealed away, never to escape. The beast's conscience is locked away and the child is in no danger of possession, so there is no reason to fear the boy. I believe there are aspects of this that many in this room are missing." It was Danzu who spoke as he rose from his chair. Sarutobi leaned back in his chair as he watched his oldest political opponent talk. Danzu was as slippery as they come. The bandaged elder continued, "From our spies' reports, we know that just a few months ago, the Yondaime Kazekage sealed the desert spirit Shikaku into the body of his youngest son to create a weapon for Suna. He is not the only to do so. The other great villages, and even some of the smaller ones, have created their own Jinchuriki for use against their enemies. Konoha is the only one of the 5 great villages to not have their own demon weapon. Sarutobi cut him off. If you are suggesting that we turn the boy into a living weapon, then the answer is no. Not only will I never agree to it, Minato's last order was that the child would not be turned into some killing machine, and as you already know, the council must follow the final order of the Hokage regardless of their feelings on the matter. Danza frowned. There was no fighting the final order of a Hokage. Fine, if he couldn't have the boy, then he should get rid of a potential problem. If we cannot reap the benefits of the child's condition, then I say we kill it before it can turn on us and harm the village. There it was. Danza said what some were thinking. Many of the council leapt to their feet, calling for the small baby's blood. A good few shouted them down, proclaiming the newborn's innocence, and there were some who said nothing, opting to weigh the decision before commenting. All were silenced though when Sarutobi slammed his fist on the table, the loud noise startling those attending into silence. The old ninja slowly rose to his feet and leaned over the table, his hat shadowing his eyes as he spoke to the council, deadly threat lacing every word. You will all listen to me very carefully, for I shall say this only once. This child will not be killed. Any who so much as lays one ill-meaning finger on the boy will be executed without hesitation. The Yondaime asks that you see this babe for the thing that he is, a hero. I know that it is a fool's hope that everyone in the village sees him like this, so if your thoughts are of the negative, then keep them to yourself, for they are neither needed nor warranted now. In a few days' time we will tell the village of the boy's existence, and I will pass along this same warning. If anyone tries to harm the boy, they die. If anyone gets someone else to harm him, they die. If anyone speaks of the boy's condition, they die. This boy saves our village from a terrible evil merely by living, a duty he did not ask for but now has no choice in. His life won't be easy, but I'll be damned if I let ignorant, narrow-minded fools take out their grief and pain on a helpless child. The silence that ran throughout the council room was deafening. This was not Sarutobi, the kind leader. This was the Sandaime Hokage, the feared god of shinobi. They watched as their leader lifted the small bundle into his arms and walked towards the doors. The guards opened them to allow their leader through when Kohara finally found her voice. Hiruzen, wait! Sarutobi stopped just inside the doors, but didn't turn around. Yes, Koharu? What's the boy's name? Sarutobi looked down at the tiny infant in his arms, a gentle smile playing about his mouth as he gazed upon the newborn's peaceful face. His back still to the gathered council, he gave them his answer before striding out the door towards his office. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. Sarutobi gently placed baby Naruto in a cot in the medical wing of the Sarutobi compound. The worn fighter folded his arms inside the sleeves of his robes as he watched the small blonde sleep, the burdens of command temporarily forgotten. For a while only the soft off view of the baby permeated the air before it was broken by the sound of the door opening. Father? Sarutobi turned to the voice and smiled as his eyes rested upon Kinome, his pride and joy. She was beautiful. Her dark brown hair was the same shade of brown as the rest of her family and was spiked the same as her brother Asuma's, the only difference being the shorter, neater spikes and the 2 strands that fell from behind her ears to just about the same height as her chin. It was her eyes that were different though. They had no pupil and the iris was fallow in color in the center, but became a more khaki shade as they neared the edge. Her mother's eyes. She had her mother's eyes. Her body was small and compact, the kind you would see on a gymnast or acrobat, but she wore it wonderfully. A slight hourglass figure was hidden under a small, dark brown leather bodice-like waistcoat that zipped up the front, worn over a sleeveless fishnet shirt that bared all of her shoulders. Her not-so-inconsiderable cleavage was fortunately, or unfortunately depending on your point of view, by the large collar of the long red scarf she wore around her throat, the 2 tails falling to the back of her knees and her hitayite attached to the center of the collar, under her chin. The backs of her hands and her forearms were protected by a short pair of off-white metal vambraces, a gift from the Monkey King Enma himself, with a pair of fishnet elbow pads. Across her back were 2 halves of a folded red metal bowstaff, connected by a short string of metal wire, which Sarutobi himself taught her to use. A pair of very baggy black capri pants tied just below the knee and a pair of black sandals completed the ensemble. Sarutobi strode to his youngest offspring and took her delicate hands in his wrinkled ones. Daughter, are you all right? Kinome gave her father a soft smile. I'm fine, just a little tired. So, what happened? Sarutobi sighed tiredly. The Kyuubi was stopped, but at too great a cost. And that has something to do with the child you brought home with you, I presume? She guessed as she glanced over his shoulder at the cot where Naruto lay. Sarutobi raised an eyebrow in slight surprise. And what makes you think that? Well, if it were just a normal child, then you would have had a ninja deliver it to the hospital instead of going to all the trouble of sneaking it into your own home, and put the child in your own private infirmary, making sure that no one saw you." Sarutobi chuckled. Kinome had always been the more observant of his two children. "Alas, you have found me out." Kinome smirked at her father. "You'll never be able to hide anything from me, old man." Her smirk vanished as she cocked her head to the side, shooting her father a questioning look. "So, are you going to tell me why your mystery baby deserves so much secrecy?" Sarutobi gave his daughter an appraising look as he thought about how to tell her. Finally, after a few moments, he gave the best answer he could. "Jinchuriki." Kinome's eyes widened as she looked back at the cot. Stepping around her father, she made her way over to the sleeping babe as she rested her hands on the cot's railings. Sarutobi watched her as she looked at the child. After a few moments, without looking away from the small blonde, she asked, "Shiki Fujin?" Sarutobi nodded. "Yes." "Then Minato?" "Yes." She sighed. "And how did the council take it?" Sarutobi sighed heavily as he went to stand beside her. "Some wanted to kill him, others didn't. Danza wanted to make him a weapon, and the rest tried, unsuccessfully, to wrap their heads around the idea that the demon that nearly destroyed the village is being held prisoner inside the stomach of a baby only a few hours old." Kinome snorted. Like her father, she was a sucker for knowledge, and she had read about Jinchuriki, and about the general image that those around them seemed to hold for them. Basically, most people thought of Jinchuriki as the lowest level of life there is, holding a hatred for the simple reason that they exist. Jinchuriki were often used as weapons, but no matter how many battles they win, they were always hated and feared. Their average life expectancy was 25 if they were lucky, the biggest causes of death being suicide, their seals breaking and the release of their demons, or being executed by their own village. The life of a Jinchuriki was a truly tragic tale. Looking down at the small face peeking out from a swath of blankets, Kinome could feel her heart breaking at the prospect of what the poor boy's life was going to be like from now on. His face showed so much innocence, and Kinome was forced to wonder how long he would be able to hold on to that innocence before it was torn away. "So what's going to happen to him now?" she asked quietly. Sarutobi was quiet a moment before he answered. "I told the council that he would be placed in an orphanage or foster home." Kinome rounded on her father. "What?" she hissed quietly for fear of waking the baby. "How could you? You know what will happen. Giving him to the mercy of the village right after the attack is basically you putting the noose around his neck." Sarutobi nodded. "I know." "Then why dash?" Sarutobi cut her off. "If the council think he is in an orphanage or foster home, then any who wish him harm will have to make quiet inquiries to find him. Then can't just march into an orphanage and start searching the children for seals, can they? How long do you think it'll take for them to search all the orphanages and foster homes in Konoha before they realize that he's not in any of them?" A grin slowly made its way onto her face as she realized where her father was going with this. "Quite a bit of time, I'd imagine." "Precisely. It would take years. That would give us enough time to keep him safe for the first few years of his life and make sure he's properly looked after before we can set him up with his own apartment with a guard to watch over him." Kinome bit her lip as a thought came to her. "Why can't we just adopt him? I'm not comfortable with the idea of making a child live on his own at such a young age." Sarutobi took his hat off and scratched his balding head as he answered. "Me either, but the civilian members on the council would cause enough trouble block any attempts to adopt him. At least this way we can make sure he gets the proper nutrition and care now when he needs it most." They stood in silence as they watched Naruto sleep, the moonlight filtering through the curtains. It seemed like an eternity before Sarutobi broke the silence. "I should get back to the council. Can you stay with little Naruto until I come back?" Kinome nodded and pulled a chair over to sit beside the crib as Sarutobi walked out the door. With a final glance back at his daughter, Sarutobi shut the door with a click. It was late the next morning when Sarutobi next passed by his infirmary to see Kinome and Naruto. He pushed the door open, but stopped when he heard humming. Peering into the room, he saw a sight that warmed his heart. Kinome was standing in front of the window, the sun's light shining at her back as she held Naruto in her arms. The boy giggled wildly as he reached for Kinome's hair as she rocked him, humming the same tune that Kinome's mother used to sing to her when she was a little girl. Sarutobi smiled as his heart lightened at the tender scene in front of him. Locking the image away in his memory as he quietly closed the door, he headed to his room for a few hours of sleep, humming the same tune as Kinome. Suddenly the days ahead seemed a whole lot brighter. Naruto remained a guest of the Sarutobi family for 3 years. He grew up quickly and healthy, soaking up the attention that Kinome and Sarutobi showered upon him, as well as the attention of the Sarutobi's trusted staff. Kinome hardly took any missions during that entire time, opting to spend her days playing with Naruto. She was there when Naruto spoke his first words. She watched him take his first steps. She was there to hold him when he got hurt. She sang to him every night. To her, Naruto was her son. Even if she could never claim him as her own legally, she would always make sure that everyone knew he was hers, and that to hurt him would invoke the wrath of Sarutobi Kinome. Naruto also thought of Kinome as his mother. As far as he was concerned, his entire life revolved around him and Kinome, and he couldn't have been any happier. He was always trying to impress her with all the cool things he could do. He wouldn't go to sleep unless she was there to sing to him, and she always gave the best piggyback rides. She also did this weird thing where she bit her thumb and slammed her hand into the ground and made monkeys for him to play with. That was the best. Yes, life at the Sarutobi household was most exciting for those precious years. But it was not to last. Kinome knew that Naruto couldn't stay with them forever. She had always said that she would always look after him, even after he was forced to move out. But the idea of making him live on his own, in a strange place all alone, without her there to protect him tore at her heart. To lessen the blow to both mother and child, they had told Naruto of their plans months before they were put into action and began to gradually ease them into the process. They showed him pictures of the places that they were thinking of moving him into, let him choose the designs of the house, and showing him how to do things by himself. He seemed both scared and excited by the idea, but was assured when they told him they'd visit all the time. Kinome, however, was having a harder time with the transaction. She tried to spend even more time with Naruto, trying to convey all of the love she felt for him before he had to go and face those who hated him because of what he was. The thought of him not being around terrified her so much that she spent many nights in Naruto's room, watching him sleep as she silently cried. With mounting dread, she counted down the days until her son would be taken from her. The closer the day came, the greater the depression, and Sarutobi began to fear for his daughter's health until one day when Kinome came to him with a proposition. Flashback begins. Kinome walked into her father's study, her face a mask of professional stoicism. She stopped in front of his desk and stood at ease, her legs spread slightly and her arms clasped behind her back, telling the old man that this was a professional matter, not a domestic one. He looked up at his daughter with a raised eyebrow as he lit his pipe. Letting the smoke fill his lungs, he leaned back in his chair, thankful for the break from his demanding job. "Can I help you with anything, Kinome-chan?" Kinome nodded. "Yes. I thought about it, and I've made the decision to take up the standing offer presented to me to join the Umbu Black Ops." Sarutobi frowned at this. "Kinome-chan, you know I don't want you going to the Umbu. The work required is too gruesome." "I know, but I was hoping to get an inter-village posting." Sarutobi cocked an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I know that in a few months there will be a property inside the village requiring near round-the-clock Umbu protection. I figure that I qualify for the position as I have an in-depth knowledge of the client, and can easily handle any trouble that comes along." Sarutobi crossed his arms and leaned across the desk. "You're talking about being Naruto's Umbu guard?" Kinome nodded. Sarutobi mulled it over in his head. There were a lot of pros for the idea and very few cons. Naruto wouldn't be totally alone, he wouldn't be separated from his mother for too long, he could have his meals made for him so that he doesn't have an accident with the stove, and so many other things that allowed Sarutobi to make his decision in seconds. "I'll have the orders in the morning." Kinome squealed in delight, breaking her professional mask, and ran around the desk to give her father a tight hug. "Thank you, father!" "You're welcome, Kinome-chan." Flashback ends. Naruto was of course delighted with this turn of events. Now he'd be near Kinome, and he could talk to her all the time. So, with everything set for Naruto's departure from the Sarutobi household, they packed all his belongings, said goodbye to the servants that Naruto had become friends with over the years, and left for Naruto's new home. To avoid trouble, Kinome placed a genjutsu over Naruto, masking his presence from anyone under high jounin level and skill. The area was one of the most deserted parts of Konoha, the nearest inhabited homes being blocks away. After the many deaths of the Kyuubi attack, the survivors relocated nearer the center of the village for a greater sense of security, and since immigration into any hidden village is strictly controlled to root out any threats or spies, there hadn't been any significant increase in population aside from the usual births. So the place was very private, to say the least. Perfect for their plan. Kinome set Naruto down, and he looked at his new home in wonder. This wasn't what he was expecting when he'd imagined where he was going to live. The place was massive. It was the same size as most clan houses, with many wings full of sleeping quarters, training areas for ninja, an infirmary, a library full of books that Sarutobi and Kinome picked out, a few gardens, and a large courtyard in the direct center. The place was the definition of traditional Japanese design when it came to homes. Everything was on the ground level, with sliding doors and partitions dividing the house into sections, with tatami mats covering the floors. Electrical lanterns hung from the ceiling, lighting the hallways. The redwood, the paper screens, and the yellow light gave the place a cozy, warm feel, and Naruto could tell that even though he was living on his own, he would be comfortable. "This place is cool," Naruto exclaimed as they stood in his bedroom. It was large with a low bed and stuffed with toys, books, and other assorted items of interest to those with attention spans of 3 seconds. The walls were artfully painted to represent a forest, and the dark green carpet and cobalt blue ceiling only improved the look. But what Naruto really liked was the bed. It looked like a cross between the flattest bed and the most badass futon that he had ever seen. It was a large circular mattress set into the ground so that it was perfectly level with the floor, the size perfect so that there wasn't even the smallest gap between the mattress and the floor. The duvet had bright golden flames designed on it that seemed to shine in the light. Naruto realized with a grin that the bed represented a fire in the center of a forest clearing. With a yell of glee, Naruto dived onto the bed, relishing the comfort that the soft bed provided. Sarutobi and Kinome chuckled at the goofy grin spread across his face. "So do you like your new home, Naruto?" Sarutobi asked with a smile. Naruto nodded vigorously. "Yeah. This is so cool." "Alright, well you'd better go get changed for bed. It's almost 9 p.m. "Okay." He bounced off of his bed and into his ensuite bathroom, only to emerge a few minutes later in his pajamas, including his favorite panda cap. He dived under the covers of his bed, and snuggled into the mountain of pillows with a sigh of content. After a few seconds he cracked one eye open to stare at Kinome expectantly. Chuckling, she grabbed his favorite book and crawled in beside him, wrapping an arm around him and drawing him to her side. They waved goodbye to Sarutobi, and Naruto soon drifted off to the sound of Kinome's melodious voice. With a sigh of content he fell into a blissful sleep. They hid in the shadows adjacent from the main entrance of the compound, watching for any sign of movement. Wrapped in swaths of dark rags, they moved forward and leapt over the gate, landing in the empty courtyard. Their leader gestured with a single hand and they surrounded the large double doors ahead. 2 men grabbed the handles and with a nod to the others, slid the doors open quickly and quietly. The 7 shadows disappeared into the darkness of the household, intent on finding their target. It was only by pure chance that they found out about this place. After the attack, the boy seemingly vanished into thin air. It was obvious to everyone that the Hokage knew where he was, but would not tell the council, no matter how much they wanted to make sure that the boy was properly taken care of. Unfortunately, they couldn't force the Hokage to reveal the child's location because of lack of support among the council. Many of those fools felt either sympathy for the creature or chose to take the wait-and-see approach. Finally, one of the counselors that saw the danger that the child overheard the Hokage speaking to his daughter, talking about a compound on the edge of the city, and about a child that was kept there. The counselor told a ninja companion of his and requested that he scout this mystery compound. They couldn't believe it. It was him. At first glance he appeared no different from any other human child, but such was the way of a kitsune. They were tricksters by nature, and could assume the most disarming of forms. The only way they were able to see it for what it was thanks to its markings. Upon each cheek were 3 whisker-like scars. Couple this with the boy's angular facial features and his slightly slanted eyes, and the boy had the unmistakable appearance of a fox. They would go in that night. The group stopped at a juncture in the corridors of the compound. The leader glanced around the halls and sighed. This place was massive, and their target was small. The fact that they had no intelligence on the layout didn't help. With a few whispered instructions, he sent 2 of his men down one corridor, the other 2 down the second, and took the remaining 2 with him down the last corridor. As they progressed, they slid open each door, hoping to catch a glance of their target. Keeping out of the moon's light, they came to a large courtyard, with large slabs paving the ground. Sudden movement caught his eye, and he crouched even lower, almost going prone. He narrowed his eyes, trying unsuccessfully to pierce the gloom ahead. From his belt, he pulled his trusty mace, twirling it in his hand comfortably as he stepped forward, out of the shadows, his 2 men following. He stood proud in the center of the courtyard, his weapon clutched firmly in his hands. His blood sang with the promise of battle, and the knowledge that his loved ones would be avenged soon. "Up there!" His head snapped upwards at his companion's harsh whisper, and his heart beat even quicker. A shadowed figure was perched like a cat on top of the tiled roof, the moon at its back, casting it entirely in darkness. 2 long tails billowed around it in the night wind as it appeared to regard them. The leader swallowed past the lump in his throat. It was time. "You there?" he called, his voice echoing in the night. "Identify yourself." The shadow launched itself of the roof, flipping gracefully before landing silently in front of them, its head snapping up to peer at the three men in front of it. Sliding to its feet, it began towards the intruders, causing them to take a nervous half-step back before the moonlight cast light on the figure. The leader let out a shaky sigh of relief. Kinom-sama. He bowed slightly to the Hokage's daughter, who stood before them stoically, her eyes glittering in the moonlight. Najura-san. She nodded back politely, recognizing the young jounin. May I ask what brings you here tonight? The man, Najura, licked his lips nervously, and reaffirmed his grip on his trusty mace. We have come here to eliminate a threat to Konoha, he said, throwing his chest out proudly. Kinom raised one elegant eyebrow, his face remaining devoid of expression. Really? She asked. And what threat would that be exactly? We have come to eliminate the demon that almost destroyed the village 4 years ago. He gestured towards the surrounding buildings. We have heard from our supporters on the council that the creature has taken up residence in this abandoned compound. Kinom's eyes narrowed slightly. I see. She let her eyes close, and drew in a deep, calming breath of night air. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. Najura's jaw fell, but he quickly recovered. Why? That demon is a threat to our home. Every second that it is allowed to live is more time for it to gather its strength for another, even greater attack. Why are you defending it? Kinom opened her eyes and gazed up at the twinkling stars above as she answered, 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is, because my father, the Hokage, has ordered that the child not be harmed. Reason number 2 is, the boy is not the demon that attacked our home, he is the beast's prison, and therefore he is an innocent child. And reason number 3? Najura sneered, only to balk as Kinom dropped her eyes to bore into his, her usually warm brown orbs burning with white-hot fury. Reason number 3, she hissed, her voice shaking the men to the core with its intensity, is because I will never allow anyone to harm my son. In one fluid motion, she pulled her blood-red bow staff from behind her, and launched herself at the intruders. Najura threw himself backwards as Kinom brought her staff crashing into the side of one man's neck, shattering his spinal cord, before spinning low, and sweeping the other man off his feet. In one graceful arc, Kinom stood, and brought her staff sweeping down onto the man's skull, crushing it, and splattering blood, bone, and brains across the cold stone floor of the courtyard as Najura landed a few feet away. Najura almost wet himself when he saw both his men killed so easily, and ruthlessly in less than 3 seconds. He hardly saw her move, and it was only luck that he managed to dodge. Kinom's eyes focused on him, and he brought up his mace to block when he felt a sharp pain at the base of his skull, then nothing. His world spun violently before he hit the base of the stairs at the end of the courtyard. The last thing Najura saw was the shadowed outline of Kinom, standing easily with her staff over his headless corpse. Then everything went black. Kinom let out a long breath, and folded her staff once more, hooking it across her back. Reaching into her pouch, she pulled out a black scroll, and opened it. This particular scroll was what was commonly referred to as an Undertaker's scroll, because of its use of transporting corpses. 4 of the 10 seals were filled, containing the bodies of the other intruders that sought to harm her child. She felt no remorse for her actions. People like that didn't deserve such things. She sealed the bodies into the scroll, with Najura's head getting its own seal, and cleaned the gore from the ground with a low-level swait on jutsu. She flipped the scroll into the air, where it spun for a moment before it was incinerated by one of her katon jutsu. She walked through the house until she came to the same room that her opponents had been seeking, and slid the door open. She smiled as she gazed upon her son, wrapped in his blankets, and hugging his favorite stuffed monkey. She looked lovingly at his sleeping form for a few more moments before turning and disappearing into her own room, directly across from him. After changing out of her clothes, she slipped under her own blankets, keeping her staff within reach. She would allow no one to harm her baby. Mom! The shout rang throughout the room, and Kinom woke, with a smile, a second before a little blonde missile launched itself at her. She wrapped her arms around her son and hugged him tight before holding him at arm's length. The little ball of joy grinned at his mother, his slightly longer than normal canines showing. Good morning, Naru-chan. She smiled at her son. Gigi is coming today, isn't he? He asked excitedly. He hadn't seen his grandfather in a while, and he was really looking forward to this visit. Kinom nodded. Yep, he sure is. She smiled as her son's grin grew even larger, if possible. She noticed that he was already dressed for the day. You ready for breakfast? He nodded, and bounced off the bed, allowing Kinom to get up. Why don't you go wait for me in the kitchen, Naru-chan? I'll be along in a second. Naruto nodded, and took off, leaving her to get dressed. She wasn't worried about him. Those idiots weren't foolish enough to attack during the day. They seemed to think they were safer in sneaking around in the dark. She shook her head at their logic. If anything, she was even more attentive at night. After a quick shower, she slipped into her regular clothes and made her way into the kitchen, Naruto already perched in his chair, waiting. She smiled at him and opened the refrigerator, bending over to inspect its contents. "Okay, kiddo, what do you want for eating?" Naruto scrunched his face in thought before he called out, "Eggs, toast, and bacon." Kinom peered around the refrigerator door, an eyebrow slightly raised. Naruto chuckled and scratched the back of his head at his mistake. "Eggs, toast, and bacon, please." Kinom smiled and nodded at her son. "Coming right up." After breakfast, Sarutobi arrived, only to be immediately tackled by Naruto. Kinom detached her son from her father and led the two into the sitting room, where Naruto immediately perched himself in Sarutobi's lap, the Hokage hat tilted at an angle on his blonde head. After talking for a while, Sarutobi brought up one particular topic that he and Kinom had been discussing previously. "Naruto, what do you want to do with your life?" he asked the child. Naruto looked up from his toys. "What do you mean? What do you want to be when you grow up?" Naruto looked lost for a moment before he turned to Kinom. "What do you do, Mom?" Kinom smiled at him. "I'm a ninja, Naruchan. I fight to protect the village, and everyone in it." Naruto nodded, and turned to his grandfather. "I want to be a ninja," he declared, one fist raised in the air. Sarutobi chuckled, and Kinom looked on fondly. "Are you sure?" Sarutobi asked. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. "Well, do you know how you become a ninja?" Read?" Naruto ventured. Sarutobi nodded. "Reading is a big part of it, but that's not all you need to do. You would need to train hard to learn how to fight and throw shuriken. You would also need to learn to mold chakra and perform jutsu." Sarutobi saw that Naruto was lost as to what chakra and jutsu meant, so he held out his hand and clicked his fingers. Immediately a small flame leapt up from his palm. It gave off heat, but didn't burn Sarutobi. "Whoa!" Naruto's eyes nearly left their sockets when he saw his grandfather conjured fire. "How did you do that?" Sarutobi showed Naruto the fire. "This is a jutsu, if a rather small one. I just use it to light my pipe, but it's a good example of what jutsu do. All ninja use chakra, a type of energy produced by the body, to create jutsu. Using chakra, a ninja could summon a large wall of water, or create a dragon of fire, and more besides." Naruto was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of learning how to do that. "What do I need to do?" Sarutobi sat back on the couch. "Well, you need to be taught how to channel chakra, how to throw kunai and shuriken, and learn since you don't start the ninja academy until age 8, you would need to be home-schooled in the basics, like reading, writing, and math. When can we start?" Sarutobi glanced at Kinom, who looked at her son seriously. "Naruto? Are you sure that this is what you want? Being a ninja isn't easy. It's a hard, painful, and sometimes short life. The second you become a ninja, you are bound to protect the village with your life, and it's a commitment that is almost impossible to back out of. Are you absolutely certain that you want to be a ninja?" Naruto looked back at his mother, realizing how serious she was. He thought about it. If he could learn how to do that, then he could help protect his family. Also, he would be doing what his mom did, which was cool. Add to that everyone in his family was a ninja besides him, even though there were only 2 others in the family, unless you count his mom's brother Asuma, but he had never met him. If there was one thing that Naruto cherished above all else, it was his family. He looked his mother in the eye, determination shining in his cerulean orbs. "I'm sure, Mom. If I'm a ninja, then I could look after you, and Gigi, and everyone else." Kinom searched her child's eyes for a moment longer before her face broke into a smile. "Then we'd better get you training then." Naruto stood in the center of the main courtyard of the compound as he waited for his mother. He pulled at the black, sleeveless shirt that was tucked into a pair of black sweat pants. He really liked his new training clothes. Plus, he was wearing his first pair of ninja sandals, a black pair to match his training clothes. Hearing one of the doors sliding open, he looked up to see his mom walk into the courtyard. "Are you ready to start, Naruto?" she asked. He nodded. "You bet." She smiled at him. "Okay, well, as I promised, I'm going to teach you how to unlock your chakra. The first thing you need to do is form your first seal." She held up her joined hands. "This seal is called the Ram seal. It's the most basic seal there is, and it's used in nearly every jutsu there is. There are many seals other than this one, but we'll focus on this one for the moment. As you focus your chakra, You can actually feel it moving through your body. Right now I want you to mold some chakra and try to push it out of your body. Doing this will unlock your chakra points. After the first time, we'll do it a few more times to make sure you unlock all your chakra points. Give it a try. Naruto nodded and brought his hands up into the ram's seal, and focused. When he was starting to think that maybe he was doing something wrong, he felt something. It was like a warmth spreading through his body. Kinom nodded to herself. That's good work, Naruto. You've managed to circulate your chakra, now try to push it out through your chakra points. To make it easier, you should focus on one body part at a time. Naruto nodded, but didn't open his eyes. He began to push his chakra down, pulling it into his legs and feet. Perspiration broke out across his brow, but he grinned as he felt the blockage start to give way, so he pushed even more chakra into it. He shouted in triumph as he felt the blockage give way, and his chakra come flooding out. Now, this resulted in 3 things. Number 1 was that he had amassed a lot more chakra than he thought. Number 2 was that the sudden flood of chakra caused a massive crater to form in the ground. And number 3 was that all of this had a rocket effect on poor Naruto, and before he knew what was happening, he was launched into the air. He shouted in glee as he flew higher and higher. His triumphant grin slowly slid off his face as gravity reasserted itself, and he began falling back to the stone floor below. He clenched his eyes shut in preparation for the pain when he felt a thin, but strong, pair of arms catch him. He opened his eyes to see his mother looking down at him, a bemused smirk on her face. Well, it's a start. She chuckled as she set him on the ground. Naruto was still a little stunned at his impersonation of a missile. Was that normal? Kinom shrugged. No, but you're my son, you're genetically programmed to be awesome. Naruto grinned as he made the ram's seal again. By the end of their session, Naruto had been launched into the air 5 more times, and was sent crashing into the wall 12 times. Are you sure? I could just cancel, it wouldn't be a problem. I'm sure. Sarutobi insisted. Kinom-chan, you've hardly had a night to yourself the last few years. Just go out, and have fun. I'll look after Naruto. Kinom bit her lip, unsure. She was dressed in her favorite black dress, and heels, with bangles and hoop earrings completing the ensemble. She was being dragged out for a night on the town with her friends, the first in a long while. It wasn't that she missed them, she would gladly spend all her time with Naruto, but her friends had been most insistent, and apparently had her father on their side. Another thing that made her want to ditch her friends for the night was Naruto's safety. She knew he would be alright with her father, but she would feel a whole lot better as she was the one looking after her son. She sighed as she realized that she wasn't going to get out of this one. Fine, but you call me at the first sign of trouble. Are we clear, old man? She asked, her brow raised in warning. Sarutobi chuckled. Fine. Go and have fun. She turned and walked to the door. With her hand on the handle, she turned back to her father. Remember, watch out at night. Sarutobi's smile was that of a predator. Don't worry. I didn't earn the title of Hokage by chance. I may be old, but I still have quite a few tricks up my sleeves. Kinom nodded, and turned, closing the door behind her. Sarutobi brought his hand to his mouth, and bit his thumb before slapping his hand to the ground. A seal formula spread out from under his fingers, and from a cloud of smoke, emerged 10 small monkeys. Hey, Sarutobi-sama. One of the monkeys, a small red one, waved. Sarutobi crouched down to better look them in the eye. Hello, my friends. I need you to perform a small task tonight. I need you to patrol this compound, and keep an eye out for anyone who tries to sneak in. If you see anyone, you tell me immediately, no matter who they are. The little monkeys nodded in confirmation, and took off to perform their duty. Sarutobi walked back into the main sitting room, where Naruto was sat, reading up on the famous ninja that Konoha had produced. The young boy looked up as his grandfather walked into the room, and passed him the book he was reading. Hey Gigi, who are they? Sarutobi took the book in his hands, and smiled down at the picture. It was his genin team picture. He was stood behind Jiraiya, who was grinning, and giving the camera the victory sign. To their left was Tsunade, who was leaning against a training post with her arms crossed, a small smirk on her face, and directly opposite her was Orochimaru. The pale boy stood calmly, a small smile on his face. Those were better times. Sarutobi mused. He sat on the couch, making room for Naruto, who bounced up beside him. He wrapped an arm around the boy as they looked at the old picture. That, Naruto, is a picture of me with my old students, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru. Naruto peered down at the picture. I think I've heard of them. Sarutobi nodded. It's likely you have, they were very powerful, and very famous. Wow! What were they like? Sarutobi smiled nostalgically. Well, let me tell you a story about them. This was during one of our very first missions as a team. We had to track down a certain cat, when Jiraiya. The sharp clunks of wood smacking against wood echoed around the dojo. They two combatants weaved around each other, their attacks lightning fast. Naruto ducked under the strike aimed at his head, and swept low, trying to take the legs out from under Kinom, who merely skipped over his attempt. She kicked him backwards, but he maintained his balance, and reaffirmed his grip on his bow staff. They watched each other for a moment before Naruto launched himself forward, his staff descending towards her side. She easily blocked the strike, and spun, brining her staff around to catch the back of his knees, sending him to the ground. Not wasting a moment, he kicked back up to his feet, and twirled his staff around his body, driving Kinom back, and giving him some space to breathe. Sweat was dripping down his face, making his hair stick to his forehead. They had been at this for 2 hours, and his mom hadn't even broken a sweat yet. He was covered in bruises, and his body protested every movement. He had yet to land a single hit on his mother, which was the target of this session. He wouldn't last much longer, he knew it. It was time for an all-or-nothing attack. Calling up the last reserves of his strength, he rushed forward, and launched himself into the air, swinging his staff in a downward stroke. Kinom quickly brought her staff up to lock him, only for her eyes to widen when his staff smashed hers in two, never breaking from its path. Naruto felt a surge of triumph as his staff neared her shoulder, only for his jaw to drop when she stopped it mere millimeters from her skin with one of the broken halves of her staff. She sharply wrapped the other half across the back of his wrist, causing him to wince and drop his staff. She jerked him quickly forward by his numb hand, and he blinked when he found the splintered end of one of her broken staff halves inches from his eye. He let out a sigh of tired frustration. She won again. She let him go, and he fell to his butt, panting for breath. Kinom grinned down at him. Tired? She asked, only for her grin to widen when he glared weakly up at her. No fair. He grumbled. I broke your staff. I should have won. Kinom wiggled a patronizing finger at him. Now, none of that. In the proper hands, anything could be used to defeat your enemy, even if it's a pebble, or even a piece of paper. Naruto muttered under his breath as she helped him to his feet, and together they walked into the kitchen to get some water from the fridge. He plopped down on a chair, draining his bottle halfway, and wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. So is there anything you'd like for your birthday, Naruto-chan? Kinom asked as she sat down. Naruto swirled his water in his bottle as he thought about it. Can I go outside? Kinom paused with her bottle a few inches from her lips, and sighed. Naruto, you know you're not allowed to go outside. Naruto pouted. Why? I've never been outside the compound since I came here. Can't we just go to the festival this once? I mean, the fireworks are great, but I've never seen the rest of the festival. Kinom shook her head. She hardly ever needed to be strict with Naruto outside of training, but one rule she always stood by was that he was never allowed to go to the festival. If they tried to attack him in his own home, who knew what they would try during the Remembrance Festival, a massive party celebrating the defeat of the Kyuubi, and remembering those that died during its attack. You know you're not allowed to go to the festival, Naruto. Naruto crossed his arms and pouted. How come? You always say I can't go, but you never say why. Kinom closed her eyes. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. She knew that when he finally found out about his burden, everything would change. She couldn't bear the thought of it. She wanted a few more years. Just a few more years of happiness with her child before he found out about the secret, and how some of the village viewed him. She often wondered how much of his son's innocence would survive the cruel world beyond the compound walls. She truly dreaded finding out the answer to that question. Naruto, she said, there is a very good reason why I don't want you going outside. I can't tell you it yet, but I promise I'll tell you one day. Okay? Naruto nodded glumly. Besides, you're 4 right now. Only another 4 years until you start the academy. That got a small grin from Naruto. That's true. Kinom smiled, and leaned back in her chair. So, is there anything else you want? Naruto thought about it for a moment before his face broke into an excited grin. Can I get my own bow staff? Maybe if you can complete the first part of your training before your birthday. If not, then we'll see what we can do. Yes. Now go and get cleaned up. You still have history studies in an hour. Naruto's 5th birthday went off without a hitch. Sadly, Naruto didn't manage to complete the training he needed to get his own bow staff, but Kinom more than made it up to him with her gift. Cool. Naruto shouted in glee as he pulled the fabric from the box. It was a black scarf, identical to his mother's, except for the color and lack of Hittite on the front. Curving, orange flames were sewn onto the ends of the tails, which would drag along the ground if he wore it now, because of his height. When it was wrapped around his neck, the collar would cover the entire upper part of his chest, the tops of his shoulders, and be high enough to block the view of everything on his face below the eyes. "Thanks, Mom!" he exclaimed as he wrapped Kinom in a tight hug, which was easily reciprocated. "You're welcome, sweetie," she said, kissing the top of his head. Sarutobi's gift was an even greater surprise. "What's this?" Naruto asked, as the old man opened a very large scroll on the floor. Looking closely, Naruto saw the many Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sarutobi Asuma, and Sarutobi Kinom written in what appeared to be blood. Sarutobi beckoned Naruto to come sit by him. Naruto flopped down beside his grandfather, leaning into his mother, who sat behind him, watching the proceedings with great interest. Sarutobi patted the scroll reverently. "This, Naruto, is the summoning contract of the Sarutobi clan. By signing this, you will be able to summon our family's allies, the monkeys." Naruto blinked in confusion. "What do you mean, summon monkeys?" Sarutobi merely smiled, and bit his thumb, bloodying it, before slamming into the floor as the seal formula rushed from under his palm. A cloud of smoke cleared, and Naruto's eyes widened in amazement when he saw the small, brown chimp, wearing a red vest sitting in front of him. A faint memory briefly resurfaced, and Naruto turned quickly to his mother. "I remember you used to do that when I was little." Kinom smiled. "That's true. I used to summon them for you to play with. I remember you used to enjoy it." The small chimp looked around for a moment before looking up at Sarutobi. "Hey, Sarutobi-sama, what do you need?" Sarutobi smiled down at the monkey. "Sorry for disturbing you, Taka. I just summoned you as a demonstration for my grandson Naruto, as he is about to become your latest summoner." Taka turned to look at the small blonde. "Naruto? I think I heard some of the other guys talking about you." Naruto bent forward to get a look at the monkey's face. "Probably, I used to play with some of you when I was little." The small animal snickered. "You're still small, kid." Naruto's face immediately became a mask of anger. "Hey, I'm a lot bigger than you, you little fuzzball." "Who you callin' a fuzzball, shrimp?" Sarutobi leaned past the argument, to whisper to a giggling Kinom, "Doesn't that remind you of when you signed the contract?" Kinom laughed. "Yes, but I seem to remember that the monkey I argued with was a lot bigger. I wonder how old Barigu is doing, I haven't summoned him in a while." Sarutobi smirked, and broke up the argument before it came to blows. "Okay, Taka, you can go home now. Thank you for your time." Taka nodded and left, but not before pulling down his eyelid and sticking out his tongue at Naruto. "Stupid little plush toy. Now, Naruto, all you need to do is write your name in blood in one of the empty spaces." "Why?" Naruto grumbled, still glaring at the spot where Taka disappeared. "They sound like little rude balls of hair. What good would they be in a fight?" Sarutobi chuckled. "Well, the smaller ones could be used as scouts, thieves, or distractions. As they get older, they learn taijutsu, kenjutsu, and even some ninjutsu. The Monkey King, Enma, is my partner in battle, because not only is he the leader of the monkeys, and the most powerful, but he can also turn into a diamond hard staff that I can use in battle." Naruto's eyes were wide. "Wow, really?" he asked excitedly. Sarutobi nodded. "Yes. So, do you want to sign?" Naruto nodded, and scooted over to the scroll, beside his grandfather. He bit his thumb, and carefully wrote his name, just below his mother's, in his best writing. "Naruto Uzumaki." "Done." "Good. Now, all you need to do is perform these hand seals." He showed him them slowly. "When you gain the monkey's trust, you can ask them to give you a summoning tattoo, which will allow you to summon without seals. This will save you precious time when in a fight." Kinom nodded. "Yes, it does." She looked at Naruto sternly. "But you come see me before you even think about getting any tattoos, do you understand, mister?" Naruto hastily nodded as Sarutobi laughed. Reining in his amusement, he nudged Naruto's shoulder. "Go ahead. Just form the seals, push as much chakra into it as you can, slap your hand to the ground, and say Kuchios no Jutsu." Naruto nodded, and began to form the seals. When he finished the last one, he took a deep breath before slapping his hand to the ground. "Kuchios no Jutsu." Naruto couched as the resultant smoke got in his face, and frantically waved his hand to fan it away. When it finally cleared, Naruto looked up in awe. Standing in front of him was a large, black-furred monkey, which was taller than even Kinome or Sarutobi. Its arms, legs, and chest bulged with muscles, and Naruto saw that it wore a pair of baggy, ninja-style pants, with a hole cut out of the back for its tail. Its forearms were clad in a pair of vambraces that looked like they were made of rough stone, and it carried in its hands a thick club which was as long. The monkey who held it was tall. It looked around for a moment before noticing the three humans sitting at its feet. "Sarutobi-Samus, you summoned me?" he asked in a gravely voice, looking between Kinome and Sarutobi. Kinome shook her head, smiling proudly. "Nope. That was my son," she said, gesturing to the small boy in her lap. "Indeed?" The monkey quirked an eyebrow as he kneeled down to Naruto's level. "And what name does our newest summoner go by?" "I'm Naruto," he proudly declared, jabbing a thumb to his chest. "Greetings. I am Farsu. I look forward to fighting alongside you in battle." Naruto chuckled nervously as the summoned's beetle black eyes stared at him. "Likewise." Farsu nodded, and turned to the elder family members. "If that is all, then I shall inform the king of our newest summoner." "Yes, that is all, Farsu. Please give Enma my regards." The monkey nodded back, and dispelled itself. As soon as it was gone, Kinome laughed in delight, and hugged Naruto tightly. "That was great, honey! A summon that size, at your age! It was incredible!" Naruto blushed at the praise. "Thanks, but Farsu kind of freaked me out." Kinome and Sarutobi chuckled. "Farsu's a born warrior. He believes that you should show respect to those you fight beside, and it will be returned. It's a shame that not many people believe as he does nowadays." "Yeah, but luckily some of them are a little less formal," Kinome agreed. Then she looked down at Naruto. "What say we have some cake before we call it a night?" After gorging himself something rotten, and bidding goodnight to his grandfather and mother, Naruto sighed contentedly, snuggled up in his bed. He'd had a great day, got some awesome gifts, ate good food, and even made some new friends in the monkeys. Life was good. Unfortunately for him, though, the good times were quickly coming to an end. Kinome groaned as got up off her knees, flushing the toilet as she did so. This had been the third morning in a row that she had been sick, and she was enjoying it less and less. After rinsing her mouth out to get rid of the taste, she staggered back into her room to prepare for the day ahead, hoping her stomach would settle soon. Sadly, it was not to be. When her father arrived later that morning, he immediately noticed her pale and slightly drawn face. Concerned, he asked, "Are you all right, Kinome-chan?" She nodded tiredly, rubbing her temple. "Yes, father, I'm fine." "You don't look fine," he countered, pressing the back of his hand to her sweaty brow. She sighed, and leaned into his touch. "I've got a bit of a bug. It's been making me throw up every morning for the last 3 days. Maybe you should go to see the doctor," he advised. Kinome just waved it off. "It's fine, just a bug." Sarutobi sighed. If there was one thing all Sarutobi children inherited, it was the legendary Sarutobi stubbornness, and Kinome was no exception. If you tried to force her to do something, she would dig her heels in to avoid it, even if it was in her best interests, just because she didn't like others controlling her life. There was only one thing that would make her go to the doctors now. But what if this mystery bug is contagious, and Naruto catches it? That stopped Kinome in her tracks. There wasn't a thing in this world that could force her to do something she didn't want to. Except Naruto. She had always promised to protect him from everything, be it monsters under his bed, the more narrow-minded inhabitants of the village, or even some irritating stomach bug. She sighed. The old man had cornered her with that one. "Fine. I'll go to the stupid doctor," she grumbled petulantly. Sarutobi chuckled at her childishness, and ruffled her hair, like he did when she was little, ignoring her indignant whines of protest. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he walked her to the entrance. "I'll take care of Naruto. If it takes long, I can even supervise his training." Kinome hugged, and thanked her father before turning and leaping over the gate, and heading off towards the hospital. "Where's Mom going?" Sarutobi turned to see a 7-year-old Naruto peeking round the entrance door, already in his training clothes, watching his mother's retreating form. Sarutobi led the youth back into the house, closing the door behind him, and led him towards the library. "Your mother isn't feeling well, so she went to see the doctor." "Is she okay?" Naruto asked, a hint of worry in his voice. Sarutobi smiled down at his grandson. "She's fine, it's probably nothing more than a stomach bug. Now I believe it's time for your history lesson." Naruto groaned. Kinome was perched on the table in the examination room, idly swinging her legs back and forth. As Ninja had to be fit for a mission at the drop of a hat, the hospital had a policy of tending to their wounds and illnesses first, then the civilians. This caused a lot of grumbling from ill and disgruntled patients, but no one was about to challenge it, not if they wanted to stay on the good side of the equally ill and disgruntled, but still highly trained killers. No Konoha ninja would harm those under their protection without reason, but the fact that they took lives nearly on a daily basis to protect the village never left the civilians' minds for long. She sighed in boredom. The doctor had taken all kinds of tests, and now she was stuck here waiting for the results. She wished they would just give her some medicine for the vomiting, and free her from this sterile hellhole. She idly wondered if she could just leave a clone here, and head off home. She was brought out of her musings of escape by the return of her doctor. He was looking through some charts, and sat on a stool in front of her, checking over the results. After a few minutes of silence, Kinom decided to speak. "So, Doc, what's the good news? Gonna give me some pills for the vomiting, and send me on my merry way?" "Actually, Kinom-san, we need to do a few more tests," he said, not looking up from his work. Kinom's shoulders drooped. "Ah, come on," she whined. "You've done nearly every test there is. All of this for a simple stomach bug?" "This is no simple stomach bug, Saratobi-sama." Kinom sobered a little. "What do you mean?" "Well, we've discovered the cause of the sickness was an increase in progesterone in your body. There aren't any ways to prevent this, but there are treatments available that can lessen the effects for the whole duration of the condition. I'll give you a pamphlet on it before you leave." "What are you talking about?" Kinom asked. She was starting to get a weird feeling in her stomach, and it had nothing to do with the vomiting. "Congratulations, Kinom-san," the doctor said, finally looking up from his work. He had a small smile on his face. "You're pregnant." Naruto hit the ground with a thud and a groan. He weakly glared up at the smirking old man in front of him. "It's not fair. You're old, there's no way you should be this good." Saratobi chuckled as he offered the end of his staff to Naruto. The blonde grabbed it, and used it to pull himself off the ground. "Age isn't indicative of skill. I might be old, but what I lack in stamina, I make up for in experience. Never let looks fool you." Naruto grumbled, but nodded at the advice. After putting away their training gear, the two sat in the main sitting room, casually sipping some water. Naruto lay sideways in his chair, his legs dangling over one armrest, his head resting on the other, while Saratobi sat comfortably on the couch. Naruto glanced at his grandfather. It wasn't often that the two were alone like this, so Naruto decided to ask a question he had become rather familiar with over the years. "Hey, Gigi?" "Yes, Naruto?" "Why can't I go outside?" Saratobi swallowed his water, not looking at his young grandson. Kinom had spoken to him about Naruto's inquisitions into the no-leaving-the-house rule, and had asked his advice on the matter of what to tell him. He agreed that Naruto was too young to know, but he also knew that Naruto was rapidly approaching the age when it would be impossible to hide it anymore. He just hoped that the fallout wouldn't be too bad. He also hoped that the repercussions of keeping Naruto cut off from all outside contact wouldn't come back to bite them. Apart from him, Kinom, a few of the monkey summons, and perhaps some of the servants from when he lived at the Saratobi estate, Naruto had never met anyone outside the compound. He took a long breath before letting it out in an explosive sigh. "Naruto, that's something that we can't tell you yet. I know that you've been asking your mother that same question, but I agree that you have to wait. We wouldn't think of keeping this secret from you forever, but you're still too young to be told. I promise that we'll tell you before you enter the academy, but not before then." Naruto pouted. His grandfather was as tight-lipped as his daughter. "You promise to tell me before I start the academy?" "Yes, I do." "All right," Naruto conceded. "So what do we do now?" Saratobi grinned at the young boy. "Math." Naruto pleaded for mercy as his grandfather dragged him off to continue his studies. He absolutely detested math. Anko thumped her glass down on the table in disbelief as she stared at her friend. "Pregnant?" Kinom nodded as she took another sip of her tea. After she left the hospital, the first thing she did was go to her friends Anko and Kurenai for advice. They were seated in a small cafe in the western side of the village. It was out of the way of the usual hustle and bustle of the inner village, and gave of a feeling of simplicity. It was one of Kinom's favorite places in the village. Kurenai poured herself some tea, and brought the cup to her lips, inhaling the scent as she looked over at her friend. "Who's the father?" Kinom set her cup down with a sigh. "You remember a few weeks ago when you dragged me to that new club that just opened up?" Anko and Kurenai nodded. "Yeah, well, I was talking getting another drink when I ran into Loki. Hirama Lokitastu, or Loki as he preferred to be called, was a ninja they had attended the academy with. They weren't best friends, but there was a sense of closeness between them. Well, you, she pointed to Kurenai. We're talking to Yugago, and you, she pointed at Anko. We're giving vertical lap dances to anything on 2 legs. Hey! Oh please, you know it's true! Yeah, but still. Kinom just ignored her pouting friend, and continued with her story. Well, we hadn't spoken in a while, so we started talking, ordering more and more drinks as we went. Eventually I lost sight of you too, and me and Loki got more and more drunk and… Kurenai gently prodded. I kissed him. You kissed him? The other two repeated. Kinom nodded. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Anyway, eventually we left the bar. He offered to take me home, but I couldn't tell him where I lived. Anko and Kurenai nodded in understanding. As Kinom's best friends, they knew exactly why she couldn't tell Loki where she lived. They knew all about Naruto, and they knew how Kinom felt about him. They had even offered to look after him occasionally, but neither Kinom or the Hokage wanted too many people to have regular access to the compound, as that could lead to a security breach. It would only take a convincing enough henge to be able to get close enough to Naruto to harm him. Kinom continued, I was way too drunk to try and make it home on my own, so he took me back to his place, and one thing led to another, and… You slept with him. Kurenai finished for her. Kinom nodded and rested her head on her folded hands with a groan. What do I do? Her friends were silent for a moment, before Kurenai sighed and took a sip of her tea. Well, the first thing you should do is go talk to Loki. You should also talk to your father and Naruto. She glanced at Kinom with slight unease. Unless you plan to. Kinom shook her head vehemently, effectively cutting her off. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but there is no way I'm getting an abortion, that's for damn sure. I knew you'd say that. Kurenai muttered, downing the rest of her tea. The only advice I can think of is, talk to Loki and your family. They're the ones you need to talk to the most. And don't worry, we'll be there to help you no matter what. Right, Anko? She asked as she rested a hand on Kinom's shoulder. Anko grinned as she placed her hand on Kinom's unoccupied shoulder. Of course. You won't let me near Naruto, so now I have another one of your kids I can corrupt. Kinom chuckled, placing a hand over Anko's, and resting her cheek against Kurenai's. And you wonder why I don't let you babysit. Kinom did follow her friend's advice eventually, after mourning the fact that she couldn't touch any alcohol at what was undoubtedly one of the most stressful times of her life. Loki was shocked, of course, sitting in shock for well over 2 hours before Kinom smacked him out of his stupor. After a long conversation, they decided that they would keep the baby, a fact that was quickly decided after Kinom promised that if he used the words abortion or get rid of, then this would be the only child he would ever have. But they both agreed that a relationship wouldn't work out, so they would share custody. Since Kinom was better prepared to care for a child, the Sarutobi fortune was nothing to be scoffed at. It was decided that the baby live with Kinom. In the end, things worked out better than they both expected. Loki didn't make for the hills, like Kinom was expecting, and Kinom didn't rope him into a marriage, like Loki feared would happen. At least that meeting went well. The one with her father did not. For Loki's safety, it was decided that Kinom be the one to break the news to her father. It seemed that no matter how old a man got, the overprotective father gene would never go away, and as such Sarutobi was halfway through an assassination order with Loki's name on it before Kinom bopped him over the back of his head with her staff. After the elder Sarutobi calmed down, with help of copious amounts of smoking, Kinom was able to explain the circumstances. While Sarutobi was relieved at the fact that Kinom was going to face her responsibilities head-on, which was pretty much guaranteed when she'd been looking after Naruto for so long, he still made it clear that he was disappointed with her for her lack of judgment, but also that he'd always be there to help. The talk with Naruto was by far the easiest of all. He was bouncing off the walls at the prospect of having a little brother or sister to play with. Never having even seen another person his age, it was understandable. He was always asking questions about his new sibling. Would it be a boy or a girl? When would it arrive? Would there be more than one? He just craved knowledge about the latest addition to their family. Although he didn't much care, he was hoping just a little that it would be a boy. Family or no, he didn't much like the idea of a girl bringing cooties into the house. His mom was okay. Moms didn't have cooties, it was scientific fact. Currently the soon-to-be big brother was sitting on the surface of one of the compound koi ponds, leaves attached to his hands, forehead, elbows, knees, and feet, an open scroll in his hands. He was reading up on Shugi in preparation for his meeting with Enma, the king of the monkey summons. His grandfather had explained that the way to earn Enma's respect, and the right to summon monkeys for use in battle, was to beat Enma at a game of shugi. The reason for this was that the monkeys were noble warriors by nature, and would only fight with those who possessed the mind of a warrior. Meaning that if you didn't show skill with plans and tactics, then you were on your own. It was a fair test in Naruto's opinion. Hearing one of the doors slide open, Naruto looked up to see his mother and grandfather enter the courtyard. He smiled as he saw his mom. She was beginning her 3rd month of pregnancy, and the slight bump of her stomach showed it. He didn't know what it was, but she seemed to glow with happiness. Or at least, she usually did. Right now that glow seemed to be caused by anger, judging from the look on her face. "Hey Mom, Gigi!" He waved. Kinom smiled back, although he could tell she was still mad. "Come here a minute, sweetie, there's something we need to talk about," Kinom told him. Confused, Naruto rolled up his scroll, and allowed the leaves to fall from him before he walked to sit at the side of the pond with his family. Kinom wrapped an arm around him, which he leaned into as Sarutobi stood before them. "Naruto," the Hokage began. "I've been talking to your mother, and we've decided." "You decided?" Kinom cut in with something akin to a growl, which startled Naruto. He'd seen his mother angry at anyone before. Sarutobi sighed. "I decided that it would be best if your mother got as much rest as she can during her pregnancy. So I put forth the idea that, in 2 months' time, she move back into the Sarutobi compound until the baby is born. An idea which I am 100% against," Kinom added. "I'm not an invalid, or some delicate doll. I can stay here until the baby is born. I don't need to be hidden away, and I don't want to leave Naruto here all by himself for that long." Sarutobi sighed tiredly. He didn't want to leave Naruto all by himself either, but there was too much danger with Kinom staying at the compound in her condition. Even if he posted guards, something that neither he nor Kinom wanted to do because of the possibility of a Naruto hater being assigned, there was always the chance of her, and the baby, being hurt in the crossfire. This wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for Naruto. She would go back to the compound in a second if she could take him with her, but that wasn't possible. The Sarutobi compound was scheduled for a complete renovation, and while the servants didn't have a problem with Naruto, the civilian workers would undoubtedly bear some animosity towards him. It only took one to tell someone on the council, and that could cause a lot of problems. If the Naruto haters thought that the Sarutobis were housing Naruto, they'd cause all sorts of trouble. They had been lucky so far as only a few pockets of hostile civilians actually knew where Naruto lived, and there was always a chance that if they tried to round up others like them to try harm Naruto, they would blab to someone that didn't hate Naruto, and that could land them in jail, or worse. "Why does she need to go?" Naruto asked. Sarutobi smiled down at the blonde. "Pregnancy is a very stressful time for women, Naruto, and they need all the rest they can get, or it could put them or the baby in danger. And I'm guessing that I won't be able to go with her." It was more of a statement than a question. Sarutobi sighed tiredly. "I'm sorry, Naruto, but it's connected to the reason why you can't go outside." Naruto's face remained stoic. "The same reason I still haven't been told?" Sarutobi rubbed his forehead helplessly. "Naruto, I promises that we would tell you before you start the academy. That's only a few months away after you turn 8. I promise that there is good reason for these restrictions, but I ask that you trust me until then. Believe me, there is good reason for all this." "No!" Kinom cut in forcefully. "Don't try to butter him up, old man. If he doesn't want me to go, then I'm staying here, and believe me," her eyes narrowed dangerously, "nothing would force me out." "Mom." Both Sarutobis looked down at Naruto, who had a soft, resigned smile on his face. "You should go." Kinom blinked. "Naruto." Naruto just shook his head. "If it's best for the baby, then you should do it. It'd be selfish of me to put my little brother or sister at risk just because I wanted you all to myself." He chuckled lightly. "What kind of ninja will I be if I can't last a few months without my mommy?" Kinom looked at her son sadly. Even though he'd never met his sibling, he was doing what was best for the baby, even if it meant sacrificing his own happiness. It may have been only for a few months, but for a young child that was a long time. Smiling softly, she pulled him into an embrace, and kissed the top of his head. "You're going to be a great big brother, Naruto. This baby's going to be very lucky." Naruto grinned up at his mom. "I'm going to be a big brother, it's my job." Kinom laughed. "And you'll do a fantastic job of it. I promise that when I do go, I'll come back and see you as often as I can." Naruto smiled. "At least we still have 2 months. Until then we'll have tons of fun, right?" Kinom smiled back. "Right." It was nearly midnight. The full moon shone high in the inky black night, its light breaking through the gap of the curtains, illuminating the shuddering figure occupying the sole bed in the room. The thick sheets were wrapped around her body, which was curled into a tight ball of misery. Her choked sobs were the only sound that permeated the nightly silence. Kinome wiped at the tears which fell from angry red eyes, but no matter what she did, more fell. She buried her face into her pillow to muffle more cries of anguish. She received the news little over 2 hours ago. She'd been in her father's office, discussing the security arrangements for Naruto. Flashback begins. No, Kinome said firmly. Sarutobi sighed wearily. Kinome-chan. Not a chance? In hell. He's the best choice we've got. Sarutobi tried to reason. Kinome narrowed her eyes at her father from across his desk, her arms folded stiffly across her chest. There is no way in hell that I'll allow Hatake Kakashi to look after my son. Kinome, he wouldn't harm Naruto. Sarutobi tried to reason. Kinome just shook her head. I don't care. I know he's thought a little towards Naruto over the years, but I know he still resents him. He doesn't blame Naruto for Minato's death. Yes, he just hates him for being the Kyuubi's container. Trust me, if you let him talk to Naruto, he'd be a cold, spiteful bastard. I don't want someone like that looking after my son. Why can't Kurenai or Anko look after him? Anko's busy with an important investigation, and Kurenai is still a chunin. We'd agreed that it should be someone of high jounin level that guards Naruto. Sarutobi told her. Kinome sighed. I wish Nichan was still here. I'd feel a lot easier if he looked after him. Sarutobi nodded silently. His 2 children were very close. Kinome had been heartbroken when her older brother left to join the Guardians. He'd wager that if Asuma decided to return, he'd be greeted by a warm hug and a severe beating. She'd probably break his legs as incentive not to take off again. Kinome, Kakashi's one of the best ninja we have. He wouldn't let his personal feelings influence the mission. Plus, there aren't many others to choose from, Sarutobi stated. But what about fine? Kinome relented reluctantly. Bring the pervert in, and we'll talk to him. Sarutobi immediately sent out a messenger to fetch Kakashi, with a strict warning that if he wasn't here in the next 5 minutes, Sarutobi would ban Ika and face masks from Konoha, not that he'd ever ban those lovable orange books. True to his tardy nature, Kakashi arrived with 10 seconds to spare, entering with his porn out, a perverted blush upon his face. He looked up at the exasperated old man, and the fuming woman, with something translatable to a sheepish look on what was visible of his face. Sorry I'm late, there was. Kakashi, I'm not in the mood for your preposterous excuses. Sit down, put your book away, and listen. Sarutobi interrupted. He was in no mood for Kakashi's eccentrics, and he was pretty sure Kinome would give him a pretty personal introduction to her staff if she had to put up with him for too long. Kakashi, I'll be blunt. I've called you here because you'll be taking on an S-rank mission for the next few months. It's a bodyguard assignment. Specifically, you'll be guarding Kinome's child. Kakashi turned a concerned eye to Kinome, his gaze flickering to her stomach for a moment. Is someone out to hurt the baby? No, Sarutobi told him. The baby's fine. The person you'll be guarding is Kinome's other child. Kakashi blinked in confusion. I wasn't aware that you had a kid already. Kinome glanced away. He's adopted. Sarutobi continued. His existence has been kept secret from the village for security reasons. We haven't even been able to officially adopt him because of hostile elements within the village itself. Kakashi whistled, and leaned back in his chair. For a kid, it sounds like the child is someone pretty important, and the fact that the mission rank is S rank only confirms it. Mind telling me what makes this one kid so special? Sarutobi glanced at Kinome, who raised a brow, telling him this was your idea, you tell him. The aged Hokage sighed before he dropped the bomb. He's so important because he's the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Kakashi tensed very slightly, but both Sarutobis caught it. Really? Kakashi asked flatly, his tone a lot more neutral. I thought no one in the village knew where he was for certain. Looking for him, Kakashi? Kinome asked, her voice as cold and as sharp as Arctic winds. Kakashi spared her a momentary glance before looking ahead again. No, just commenting on what I heard from the local grapevine. Sarutobi continued in spite to the interruption. We hid him in the Sarutobi compound for the first 3 years of his life to make sure he received the care he needed, and when he was 3 we moved him, and Kinome, to the abandoned Hitori compound near the edge of the village. The area around the compound was empty for many blocks, so we thought it the best choice of place to hide him. I see, Kakashi said, his tone still irritatingly level. And why have I been chosen for this honor? Sarutobi linked his fingers before him as he addressed the jounin. In spite of our best efforts, Naruto's location has been leaked. We think it was a hunter nin returning from a mission who decided to cut through the deserted part of the village, and saw Naruto in the compound. Luckily they never saw Kinom. When this hunter nin told his friends of his discovery, they decided to get some measure of revenge against the Kyuubi, and snuck into the compound to kill Naruto. But when they snuck into the compound, Kinom intercepted them before they could find Naruto. She has full authority to kill anyone, ninja or civilian, who pose a threat to Naruto, and she has exercised that right to the fullest extent. We don't know how many people are aware of Naruto's location, but to date there have been 57 assassination attempts, all at night. Your mission will be to guard Naruto from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Kakashi, at night you will kill anyone who enters that compound at night. You will also not interact with Naruto during that time, and he must not know he is in danger or that he has a guard. On most days either myself or Kinom will be with Naruto so you can go home and rest, not that you need to worry about an attack during the day anyway. The mission will last until Kinom delivers her baby. You are to tell no one what you are doing, where you are doing it, and you mustn't let anyone see you entering or exiting the compound. Do you understand? Ha, Hokage-sama, Kakashi replied. There was no point in fighting it, plus with the order that the kid wasn't to know he was in danger then he didn't have to interact with the blonde, and that'd make his life a lot easier. Oh, Kakashi? Kinom said, gaining the attention of the two men. Her voice was so deceptively sweet, her face the picture of innocence that you'd think she was part cherub. Yes, Kinom-san? Kakashi asked warily. Neither Kinom's face or voice changed. If anything, it got even creepier. I just wanted to say. Anything happens to Naruto while he's under your watch. Her voice dropped its cheeriness, and her transformed into one of deadly seriousness, her eyes becoming dark pools. I will break my staff off so far up your ass that you'll be coughing up pieces of metal for the rest of your life, something that I will make sure is both short and extremely painful. Understand? Kakashi, despite being a war survivor and world-renowned jounin, couldn't help but squirm slightly under that intense gaze. Kinom, I'm sure Kakashi would never allow any harm to come to Naruto while he was under his care. Would you, Kakashi? The Hokage's voice was one of gentle neutrality, but Kakashi saw the promise in his leader's eyes, one that promised him that if he allowed any harm to come to his adoptive grandson, then not a force on this earth would save him. Kakashi could only gulp and nod. Of course, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi smiled, although it didn't quite reach his eyes. All right then. Kakashi, come by here tomorrow, and we'll go over all the details. Kinom, why don't you? Suddenly the door burst open, causing the three ninja in the room to draw kunai, only to relax as they recognized the intruders. Yuzuki Yugago stood in the doorway. Her jounin uniform was torn, and burned in places, blood and grime coating her entire body. Behind her, her teammates Kekkei and Yamashiro Aoba were in pretty much the same condition, with Hyade's arm in a sling, and bandages over Aoba's face. Report! Sarutobi barked. Yugago took a deep breath before answering. Sir, we were returning to the village after our mission to Grass Country. We were a few miles outside of Konoha when we were attacked by a group of missing nin from what looked like Soon, IWA, and AIM. We were outnumbered 2-1, and were forced to make a fighting retreat towards the village. By chance we ran into a party of hunter nin leaving for a mission. The missing nin broke off, and the hunter nin took off in pursuit. Since the enemy numbers were thinned so much from battling both us and the hunter nin, we didn't think we would be needed, especially with our injuries. Were there any casualties? Sarutobi asked. Yes, sir. Yugago said somewhat hesitantly. She looked at Kinom with something that looked like pity on her face, something that made Kinom incredibly uneasy. Well? The young Sarutobi pressed. Yugago swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Kinom. They killed Loki. Flashback ends. Another body-jarring sob left Kinom as she thought about her friend, the father of her baby. A baby he would never get to see, and a child that would never know its father. She and Loki may not have been in love, but they were close, even closer now considering they were having a baby together. They had spent a lot of time together the last few months, picking out things for the baby, tossing possible names back and forth, getting to know each other more. She'd been surprised to find out that he was rather gifted in the kitchen, and that he was considering opening a restaurant. They had also spent many days with Kurenai and Anko, who teased him without mercy, and kept fishing for details about their one night together, something that Kinom and Loki both denied them. She was even planning on introducing him to Naruto, feeling that he should at least know about her other child, an idea that seemed even better when she discovered that he viewed the hidden blonde as the hero the yandere wanted him to be. There had been a small part of her that had thought that he could fill that empty role of a father figure in Naruto's life, something the young boy had been lacking in his life. She felt that the two would have gotten along wonderfully. Now that was all gone. Now they were nothing but fond memories and sweet reminiscences. Her child would know nothing of its father, except what little Kinome knew of his entire life. Loki had lost his parents at an early age, and there was no one else to raise him, so there was no other family members that the child could ask about its father. It seemed that both her children were meant to be fatherless. Mom? Kinome's bloodshot eyes peeked out from her blanket to see Naruto standing at the side of her bed, a worried expression on his face. Naruto had heard weird noises coming from across the hall. Deciding to investigate, he left his room only to discover that the sounds were something from his mother's room. Thinking something was wrong, he entered her room to see her curled under her blankets. Slightly scared, he called out to her. When her face appeared amongst the sheets, he realized that she was crying, which was something that really freaked him out. In all his life he had never seen his mom cry. It just didn't seem possible for her to cry. She was his mom. She was a strong, cool, awesome, badass ninja. There was nothing that could bring her down. So why was she crying? Are you okay? He asked, his little voice full of concern. Kinome brushed futilely at her tears, not wanting to scare Naruto. He'd never seen her like this, and she knew it had to be freaking him out. I'm okay, Han, she assured him, her voice thick. Then why are you crying? He asked. Kinome heaved a shuddering sigh. I found out that one of my good friends was hurt badly. Are they okay? Kinome shook her head sadly. No, baby, he's not okay. I'm sure it'll be okay. Naruto smiled slightly, trying his best to reassure her. He didn't like it when she cried, he decided. Do you want me to keep you company? Kinome smiled at the simple gesture. It was all he could offer, and in reality it was everything she needed. Sure. She nodded. She peeled back the blanket to allow him to crawl in beside her before she let it fall over them. She wrapped an arm around him and pressed a kiss to his head. The pain would take a while to go away, but with her children around she'd make it through in one piece. Kakashi sighed. It was 4 a.m. and he was bored out of his mind. Kinome had left for the Sarutobi compound over 3 months ago. By now she was well into her 8th month, and pretty soon her baby would be born, at which time his mission would be complete. There had been a few attempts on the boy's life, some chunin and jounin along with quite a few civilians, nothing he couldn't handle. He had been given strict instructions. Anyone who enters the compound at night would never leave. He had no problem with that. He may not like the brat, but those ninja and civilians who went against the Hokage's word were traitors, and he had no problem showing them the errors of their ways, swiftly and with extreme prejudice. His actions had been quick and decisive, and his charge was unaware of the battles for his life that were happening in his own home. Kakashi could proudly state that this mission was looking to be a success. But for now he was so bored. There hadn't been any attacks this month, and Kakashi was just looking forward to getting his pay and returning to his life. He was already becoming rather pale as a result of his odd hours, and he was pretty sure his body clock would take a while to go back to normal. His few friends would undoubtedly question his months-long strange behavior. Even the fact that most of them had guessed that it was an S-rank mission he was on, it didn't stop them from trying to worm some details out of him. Ninja were a nosy lot. Oh well. At least he had plenty of time to devote to his precious books. He was just about to make another sweep of the perimeter when a loud wailing sounded through the night. Startled, he spun towards the center of the village to see the red warning light flashing brightly, something that was only meant to happen when there was an extreme emergency, which hadn't happened since the Kyuubi attack. He moved towards the signal before he froze. He had a mission to watch the kid and make sure nothing happened to him. If he left, then he'd be leaving the Hokage's adoptive grandson without protection. The very fact that his mission was regarded as an S-rank showed its importance. But the warning siren is just as important, maybe even more so. They only ever sound it if there is a very good reason, usually something that threatens the whole village. He glanced back at the window to the boy's bedroom, torn between his choices. He could either go investigate the alarm, or abandon his charge for a little while. Both choices could have serious consequences. Kakashi looked back towards the blaring klaxons where he could see other ninja gathering, their shouting barely audible over the alarms. There was no doubt about it, there was something big going on. Well, any ninja who were going to attack tonight would rush off to the assembly point even if it was just to find out what is going on, and the civilians would probably be either too frightened to stay outside or go see what all the ruckus is about. Making up his mind, Kakashi turned away from Naruto's bedroom window and took off full speed to find the cause of the disturbance. If he had only stayed a few more seconds, he would have seen a shadow slip over one of the walls, before slowly making its way towards the doors of the compound. Naruto lay awake in his bed, staring up at his ceiling, with his hands folded behind his head. It was strange, he decided, for the house to be so empty. Even though it was just the two of them in this big empty compound, It felt so desolate without his mom there. The house felt so quiet without her. Whether it was her humming as she cooked, the sound of her staff cutting through the air as she trained, or even just her steps as she moved about the halls. He also missed the sweet scent of her cooking, the sound of her laugh when a joke was told, her tender care when he was hurt, her loving reassurances when he was scared, her warm hugs in the morning, her scolding of his grandfather when he smoked in the house, her patient teaching, her unending encouragement to try his best. But most of all, he just missed her. He sighed. She had to go for a reason. One of the things his mother insisted on teaching him was biology, and he knew that her body was under a lot of stress, something that was not good for her, or the baby. His grandfather was right when he said she should be moved somewhere she could get a lot of rest, and be properly cared for. If being lonely for a few months was the price to pay for their health, then he'd gladly pay that price 1,000 times over. Besides, it wasn't like she wanted to leave him alone. That was something she had been quite opposed to. He drew strength from that fact. But still, it was so dead around here. Deciding that sleep wasn't going to come anytime soon, Naruto decided to get a midnight snack. Kicking aside his cover, he stood, and went to his door. Sliding it open, he stepped into the dark hall. There was more than enough power to run the lights 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but both he and his mother decided it was an unnecessary waste, and fell into the routine of killing the compound lights when they settled in for the night. Walking along the shadowed corridor, Naruto couldn't help but feel a little freaked out. During the day, the compound was one of the most homiest places you could hope to find, but at night the moon's light caused shadows to dance and play tricks on the mind. The silence felt like an oppressive weight on his shoulders, heightening his other senses, and causing his footsteps to sound 100 times louder to his ears. Coupled with the knowledge that he was in this big, empty house alone, and it made for a very unnerving experience. Finally he made it to the kitchen, and set about making himself a snack, a peanut butter jelly sandwich to be exact. He sat at the dinner table, enjoying his snack in the dark, having not even bothered to switch the lights back on, a testament to how good his night vision was, when he heard a piercing wail echo across the village. Startled, he jumped from his chair, and ran to the window. Just over the top of the perimeter wall, he could see red flashing lights coming from the same direction as the loud horn. His grandfather had told him about this alarm, the early warning system for the village. When the alarm was sounded, it meant that civilians stay indoors, and ninja make their way towards the assembly points to receive further instruction. Something big must be going on, Naruto surmised, taking another bite of his sandwich. Although he was curious, he knew that he'd be in a lot of trouble if he went out to investigate, not that he'd leave anyway. He may not have been happy with his mother's restrictions on sticking to the compound, but he would abide by them for now. They promised that they'd tell him their reasons soon, and he believed them. Never once in his life had they lied to him, and he didn't think they would start now. Devouring the last of his snack, he quickly made his way back to his room, not willing to be out and about for too much longer. If he thought the compound was creepy when it was dark and quiet, then it was horror movie material with the wailing of the alarms echoing through the halls, sounding like there was something was prowling the halls and grounds. Glancing over his shoulder warily, he quickened his pace, his feet sounding a rapid thump, thump, thump against the floor. Shaking his head at his irrational fear, he turned the final corner. Only to freeze when he saw the large, hunched figure standing in front of the open door to his bedroom. Even with the meager light the moon provided, he couldn't see any detail, but thing was broad, that much was for sure. Naruto was sure that even if he spread his arms their widest, they still wouldn't be able to touch both ends of the thing's shoulders at the same time, and the top of its head would brush the top of the doorframe if it walked under it. Even from here, Naruto could smell the combination of poor personal hygiene and the stench of too much alcohol wafting from the thing. It seemed to have been looking into his room when he rounded the corner, and hearing his gasp of surprise turned its head to him, a dark chuckle rumbling from its throat. Naruto jumped when a low, rumbling, decidedly male voice broke the tense silence. Well, look what we have here. Here's me thinking I'd have to search every room in this place before I found you, and you kindly come to me, which will save me a lot of time. Thank you so much. The shadow bowed in mock gratitude. Naruto's breath came in small, shaky pants as he stared wide-eyed at the intruder. His feet were frozen in place, ignoring his mental pleas to move, and a cold hand wrapped around his heart, squeezing it in his terror-induced state. He didn't know if it was the fact that this stranger entered his home while he was sleeping, or the fact that he was looking for him specifically, but Naruto had the feeling that this newcomer didn't have the best of intentions tonight. WW, who are you? WWW, what do you want? Naruto managed to force out, amazed that there was any air in his fear-constricted lungs. Oh, how terribly rude of me. Allow me to properly introduce myself. Stepping into a patch of moonlight, the intruder was thrown into stark relief. As Naruto had already guessed, the man was huge, with a body that wouldn't look out of place on a professional bodybuilder. For the most part, he was dressed in the traditional garb of a chunin, a green flak jacket over a dark blue turtleneck, the sleeves of which were rolled up to the elbow, revealing hairy, but well-muscled arms. His shuriken and kunai pouches were strapped to his dark blue pants, which were taped at the ankle where they descended into his black sandals. Indeed, the only difference from the uniform of a regular chunin was his hitait. The cloth was pulled over his head like a bandana, the metal resting proudly on his forehead, but part of the blue material was pulled down over the right side of his head, covering his eye and ear. His face was angular and weather-worn, a few wrinkles on his tan skin around his eyes, and mouth which bore a small smirk. Wanryoku Tekkei, 35 years old, chunin of Konoha, he said, giving Naruto a small bow. Naruto, still unable to move, could only repeat, what do you want? Well, Tekkei said in a tone that suggested he was having a pleasant conversation about the weather. When I heard a rumor that a young boy named Uzumaki Naruto was living in this old compound, I just had to see if it were true. Now the fear in Naruto grew. Since he didn't go out, there was no way he could have interacted with people outside his family, therefore he wouldn't have any business with anyone outside his family. What do you want with me? Naruto asked warily, wanting nothing more than to get away, but he sensed that running would not end well. What? You didn't think anyone would come for you, after what you did? Asked Tekkei slightly incredulously, amazed at the boy's arrogance. What do you mean what I did? I've never even been outside the compound, so why would anyone want to get me? Tekkei tilted his ear towards Naruto, as if not hearing him correctly, his face showing honest surprise. You don't even know, do you? He asked, his amazement at the situation showing in his voice. Now Naruto was even more confused. What are you talking about? No what? To his surprise, Tekkei laughed in amusement, shaking his head as his chuckles rocked his large frame. He couldn't believe this kid. How could he not know? Well, I guess I can indulge you for now. Tell me, boy, what major even happened 7 years ago? That was easy. The Kyuubi attack. Naruto answered automatically. The attack had been the defining attack of that year. It had been a show of Konoha's will to survive, and overcome the odds, everyone knew that. Tekkei nodded. Yes. October 10th, reports come in that the Kyuubi was ravaging towns on the border, and was making its way towards the village. Barely 4 hours later, it arrived. We mobilized all available ninja, even taking a few retired fighters, and met the demon head-on. It cut through us like a hot knife through butter. Hundreds were killed in the first hour alone, many more were injured. I was a genin at the time, standing alongside my team, watching the monster simply shrug off our most powerful attacks. No one could stand against it, and any who tried were crushed under the demon's foot, or burned alive by its fiery breath, or torn apart by its massive teeth, or flung through the air by one of its powerful tails. A few of the older ninja simply died, the Kyuubi's terrible killing intent causing them to have sudden and fatal heart attacks. To many, it seemed like Konoha was facing its final hours. Then word came. The Yondaime had a plan that would defeat the Kyuubi and save our home. All he asked was that we hold the monster for as long as we could. Filled with hope, we redoubled our efforts, fully willing to die if it meant that Yondaime-sama's plan worked. I assume that you know what happened next? Naruto nodded hesitantly, still confused and scared. The Yondaime killed the Kyuubi, losing his life in the process, and saved the village from destruction. Tekkei nodded. Very good. Yes, that is what is said in the history books, and taught in the academy. But what you didn't know is that Yondaime-sama didn't kill the demon. Naruto's mouth dropped in shock. What? But that's what it says in all the history books. How could he not have killed it? Tekkei shook his head patronizingly. Boy, you shouldn't believe everything you read. You can't kill a demon, they're nothing but large, violent masses of chakra. The Yondaime knew this, so he did the only thing he could, he sealed it. Naruto shook his head. None of this made sense. Then why lie? Why say that he killed it when he didn't? It was an order from the higher echelons. They decided that the true events of that night should be covered up and kept from future generations. They didn't want anyone to know the truth. Naruto's face scrunched up in confusion. What do you mean? Why wouldn't they tell anyone what really happened? Why lie? Tekkei scoffed. They sought to protect the demon's container. Didn't want anyone trying to get the revenge they deserved. Naruto placed a hand to his head in frustration. None of this made one bit of sense. First, a strange ninja breaks into his house at night, looking for him no less, then proceeds to tell him that the Kyuubi isn't really dead, but only sealed, and that those in charge didn't want anyone to know the truth. What was going on? Look, he said evenly, trying not to anger the ninja. I don't know what you're doing here, or what you want with me, or why you're telling me all this, but I think you should leave. Kekkei tilted his head. Oh, but we haven't even gotten to the best part. The smirk on the man's face did very little to put Naruto at ease. Tell me, when is your birthday? October 10th. Naruto answered warily. And when did the Kyuubi attack? Oh, October 10th. The beginnings of dread began to build in his stomach. And those whisker marks? Do you know anyone else who has whisker marks like you? Kekkei's smirk grew. No. Kekkei was practically grinning. And do you know why you're not allowed outside this compound? Have you ever even talked to someone outside these walls? Ever met someone else from the village? Naruto could only shake his head. Kekkei's eyes gleamed. Would you like to know why that is? Naruto only stared wide-eyed at the man. Somehow he knew he didn't want to know. He just wanted this guy to leave, then go to bed, and forget this conversation ever happened. Sadly, Kekkei didn't leave, and his next words would change the young boy's life forever. The reason you're not allowed outside, the reason have those whisker marks, and the reason that you're not allowed out into the village is because you are the Kyuubi. Naruto froze. He didn't blink, didn't breath, he just froze where he stood. That couldn't be true, it was preposterous. He couldn't be the Kyuubi, he was Naruto. He had to be lying. Is that why I can't go into the village? No. He didn't know why he couldn't do that, but it wasn't because he was a demon. His mom and grandfather said there was a good reason he couldn't go outside the compound, but that wasn't the reason. What if it was though? What if they didn't want to risk letting me near other people? Damn it! That wasn't the reason! He wasn't the Kyuubi! He wasn't. Slowly, Naruto began to shake his head, tears filling his blue eyes. No. He said in a chocked whisper. That's not true. I'm not the Kyuubi, I can't be. I just can't be. They'd have told me if I was. You're lying. Kekkei just shook his head. Nope, kid, I ain't lying. Got no reason to. You're the demon that attacked the village 7 years ago. You killed all those people, and nearly destroyed the village. You killed innocent women and children. You tore entire families apart. You murdered hundreds of people, and laughed as you did it. You're lying! Naruto screamed at the top of his voice, tears streaking down his face. None of this was true. He had to lie. But why would he? He said it himself, he has no reason to lie. Kekkei quirked his visible eyebrow. You want proof? All right. He reached behind his head, and undid the knot holding his hatae together. The fabric came apart, and he pulled it off his head. Naruto screamed. Kekkei's head was a mass of scars and burns. The skin was completely bald, every inch of it taken up by pale, puckered scar tissue. It looked like someone had set his hair on fire before dragging him head first through a pile of very sharp razor blades. The man's right ear was missing as well, a ragged hole where it once was. However, it was the man's eye that caused him to scream. Or rather, his lack of one. Where there should have been a brown orb to match the one sitting in his left socket, there was only a gaping hole. No patch, no eyelid, nothing. The dark hole glared sightlessly at Naruto, and the boy had to choke down the urge to vomit. This was grotesque. The amount of pain his injuries must have caused. Naruto shivered, his taut nerves shooting phantom pain through him at the sight. Kekkei smiled, the effect somewhat ghastly with his empty socket and mutilated complexion. I received these when a piece of molten metal hit my face, when the Kyuubi destroyed a warehouse nearby. I was lucky to survive, but lost my eye, and all feeling where the metal touched, having burned away the nerves. You did this. You disfigured me, you killed hundreds of innocents, and you laughed as you did it. He reached behind his back for something. And that is why you have to die. He finished, pulling out an extra long kunai. This broke Naruto out of his shock and fear-induced paralysis. His terror reaching new heights, Naruto turned and ran as fast as he could, Kekkei's voice drifting after him. You shouldn't run, kid. You'll only prolong your own suffering. Naruto tried to tune him out as he pounded down the halls, turning corners blindly as he attempted to put a lot of distance between him and the psycho in his home. He glanced over his shoulder, trying to catch a glimpse of his pursuer, but he saw nothing but shadows. Not seeing where he was going, his shoulder bumped one of the walls, and he tumbled to the ground. He was back on his feet in an instant, looking around frantically for any sign of a kunai or hand coming out of the dark. He tried listening for any sound of Kekkei, but all he could hear was the thundering of his heart and the blood rushing through his ears. He took off again, losing track of where he was when he came to a dead end. Sobbing in panic, he wrenched open a door, slamming it shut behind him. He squinted, trying to see through the gloom, and his tears. The moonlight glinting of a lot of metal caused him to conclude that he was in the main kitchen, the one made to be used by multiple cooks and servants when the compound was once full. Rows of cookers, grills, ovens, and fridges took up the majority of the space, and another door stood at the opposite end of the room. Naruto felt goosebumps rise on his skin from the low temperature, and the cold tiles made him feel like he was walking on ice. The sound of approaching footsteps outside the door reached his ears and he frantically looked for some place to hide. He spotted an empty storage space under one of the counters to the right side of the room. Its positioning would block the view of the door, so Naruto quickly scrambled under the counter and clamped a hand over his mouth to hush his fear-induced pants just as the door to the kitchen was pushed open. He heard Tekkei pause just inside the room. Naruto heard the man take a few steps on the tiled floor, but he couldn't tell which direction he was moving. Naruto was surprised that he hadn't already been found, considering that his rapid heartbeat sounded frighteningly loud to him. He almost gave his position away when Tekkei's shadow appeared on the wall across from him, meaning that he was standing right behind Naruto's hiding place. He saw the shadow's head swivel from side to side as the intruder walked through the kitchen. With a growl, the shadow moved out of his sight, and Naruto heard the opposite door open and close. He didn't move, listening to the sound of Tekkei disappearing down the hall, away from the kitchen. After a minute, he finally let himself breathe a sigh of relief, and crawled out from under the counter when he glanced toward the door Tekkei disappeared through, only to see the man's mutilated face staring back at him through the glass portal in the door. Yelping in panic, Naruto threw himself through the door he entered from, racing off into the bowels of the compound, hearing his pursuer coming after him. He came to a junction when something whizzed past his ear, forcing him to throw himself prone. Looking over his shoulder, he saw the scarred Chunin marching down the corridor towards him, a scowl on his face as he pulled his arm back to launch another kunai. Thinking fast, Naruto launched himself through the door to his right, hearing the weapon pass through the space he occupied a moment prior. He looked around, and saw that he had entered the dojo where he and his mother trained. He cursed himself as he remembered that there was only one way in or out of this room, and he had just threw himself through it. Crap! He thought frantically. Oh man, what am I going to do now? He didn't have much time to think as Tekkei stopped at the door to the dojo, his massive frame blocking it. He seemed both amused and irritated at Naruto's escape attempt, his smirk pulling at his scars, twisting his already twisted visage. Not really thinking, Naruto jumped to his feet and grabbed one of the bow staffs from the weapons rack, falling into a perfect, if a little shaky, defensive stance. This only seemed to amuse Tekkei more, as the large man chuckled. You really think that'll do you any good, kid? Naruto just scowled and gripped his staff tighter. Tekkei raised a brow and shrugged. Fine. Here's me trying to make this whole thing go as quick as possible, and you drag it out. You're only making yourself suffer more, you know. Naruto lunged forward with a swing, which the man simply blocked with his forearm, not even wincing at the sharp smack of the wood against his skin. Naruto swung again, this time at the Chunin's legs, but again it was blocked. Naruto continued swinging, using every bit of skill his mother had taught him, but no matter what he tried, he couldn't land a hit on the adult. For his part, Tekkei seemed impressed by the boy's skill. It was definitely better than you'd expect from a kid his age. Hell, it was better than you'd expect from most kids in the academy. He had to admit, the boy's stamina made for a good show, allowing him to attack vigorously, without pause. He was sure that given a few more years the blonde could become a promising ninja. Too bad he won't be around to see it. Tired of playing, Tekkei caught the child's staff with his right hand, ignoring the stinging sensation, and brought his left hand down upon the shaft, shattering the weapon in two. Naruto stared dumbly at the short piece of wood in his hand that had been his last hope. Before he could come to his senses, Tekkei grabbed him roughly by the front of his shirt and lifted him high off the ground, his short legs flailing wildly. Sorry, kid, but that's enough goofing around. I need to get back before someone notices I'm gone, he said, reaching for his kunai pouch. Naruto struggled like mad, but the Chunin's grip was unrelenting. Suddenly he recalled the words that his mother had drilled into his head during their many spars. In the proper hands, anything could be used to defeat your enemy, even if it's a pebble, or even a piece of paper. Without really thinking, Naruto reversed his grip on what was once a weapon, and with all his strength, drove the splintered end of the wood deep into Tekkei's exposed forearm. The Cyclops howled in pain as his arm bled, the wood sticking out of his arm. Unfortunately for Naruto, he didn't relinquish his grip, instead leveling the boy with a hate-filled glare that had the whiskered child instantly regretting his actions. Before he could do more than blink, Naruto's stomach erupted in pain as the massive ninja buried a fist in his gut, using what had to have been most of his strength. A gob of blood flew from Naruto's mouth as stars flashed before his eyes. Kekkei pulled him close, his putrid breath washing over the poor child. You little bastard! I was going to make this quick, but now you've pissed me off. When I'm through with you, no one will be able to recognize you. He drew back his fist and brought it forward into Naruto's face, breaking his jaw and fracturing his cheekbone. The blonde flew back, crashing through the dojo wall and out into the courtyard, hitting the stone-paved ground with a thud. He could only spit out more blood as his violent trip exacerbated his injuries. A shadow fell across him, and he'd barely looked up before a kick to his already abused torso sent him across the ground, hitting the raised stone foundation of the house holding up the wooden walkways around the edge of the courtyard, making them level with the rest of the compound floors. The enraged Chunin stomped up to the whiskered blonde, and proceeded to violently stomp on every part of his body that he could, spitting curses as he ignored the child's pleas for mercy, and his screams for help. Kekkei took out his anger on the defenseless child, using the pain of his injury and the memories of the night 7 years prior to lend him strength. He couldn't even see the boy as his mind supplied images of the horrors he witnessed. He remembered seeing fleeing civilians crushed under the Kyuubi's massive paws, his comrades being burned alive by its foul breath, and felt the pain as a mass of white-hot metal melted his face, burning out the nerves. Unbidden tears came to his eyes as the images replayed themselves over and over, the sounds and smells of that night coming back to haunt him as he carried out his well-deserved revenge, not just for himself, but for everybody that suffered because of the demon. When his anger was spent, he stood back from the bloody form at his feet, his leg aching as he gulped down mouthfuls of air. He looked down at the boy as he caught his breath. The kid was a mess. Blood soaked through his clothes, and already he could see bruises blooming across his skin, which was lumpy in places where broken bones pushed against his skin. A small puddle of blood pooled underneath him, and most likely even more blood was being spilled internally from ruptured organs. Slowly, bloodshot blue eyes cracked open to stare up at the distraught Chunin accusingly. Naruto barely retained consciousness, having blacked out numerous times during his beating, only for the pain to awaken him. Even now, the darkness of blissful oblivion encroached upon his vision, and the only thing he could focus on was the man standing in front of him. From what sounded like a great distance, Naruto heard Kekkei's voice, but their meaning escaped him, like sand through his fingers. Sorry, kid, but believe me when I say you deserve this. Naruto didn't respond as his vision darkened, the pain of his injuries fading along with his awareness. The last thing Naruto saw was a flash of white, and the sound of chirping of many birds filling his ears before the darkness consumed him. Unknown to either human, a malevolent entity older than time itself watched the little exchange. He watched the boy's pitiful skills fail him, and tasted his fear as he ran like a coward. Red eyes narrowed in disgust as he saw the child being beaten, crying out for mercy, instead of fighting back. A chilling growl rumbled forth from the beast's throat as his contempt for humans reached new heights. This was his container? This whelp was pitiful. For a being of such power, and reverence as itself to be sealed within something as damnable and contemptible as this thing was an insult greater than any other. This would not stand. He would not be stuck in a weak container, not until he escaped, and had his revenge on those that sought to imprison him. That human treated the boy like dirt, even when he knew what the boy contained? Obviously they had forgotten the power and terrible might he showed that night 7 years before. Well, the beast chuckled evilly, they would remember soon enough. Kakashi rubbed his eye tiredly. When he had arrived at the assembly point, they were told that there had been a battle in the Uchiha district. When they arrived they found a gruesome sight. The ground had been slick with blood as bodies lay strewn among the streets. Some looked to have been killed by a blade, others by what looked to be a katon jutsu of some kind. Throughout the compound, the bodies of the once powerful Uchiha clan lay scattered like rag dolls. They didn't find any survivors. At least, until they came to the main house. There, lying beside the bodies of his parents, was young Uchiha Sasuke. The boy's eyes were rolled so far back in his head that all you could see were the whites, and froth foamed from his mouth as he suffered from some kind of seizure. Kakashi quickly called for a medic as he checked the boy's vitals. He had an irregular heartbeat, but beyond that there was nothing wrong with him, apart from the fit he was having. When the Hokage burst through the door, with the medic in tow, he demanded a report, only to do a double take when Kakashi was halfway through his report. Flashback begins. Kakashi, what the hell are you doing here? The old man asked, startled at the Jounin appearance. Kakashi blinked as his report was interrupted. I heard the alarm, and followed everyone else here where we found the Uchiha dead. Sarutobi gaped at the silver-haired prodigy incredulously. Glancing around for possibly eavesdroppers, he grasped Kakashi's arm in a not-too-gentle grip, and pulled him off to the side of the room. "You left Naruto alone?" Sarutobi asked in a heated whisper. Kakashi couldn't see what was wrong. "Well, the alarm only sounds when something big is going on, so I thought." "There's a reason he had to be assigned a guard, Hataki," Sarutobi interrupted. "Or did you forget that there are people out trying to kill him?" Kakashi scratched the back of his head nervously. Sarutobi was pissed. "Well, I thought that the civilians would either be too scared to stay outside with the alarm blaring, or come to investigate it, and any ninja that heard would report to their station so there would be no danger." Sarutobi actually growled at the Jounin's stupidity. Or maybe someone would see this as the perfect opportunity to try to kill Naruto, guessing that any potential guards would respond to the alarm, and kill Naruto in the commotion. Ever think of that? Kakashi paled. No, he hadn't thought of that possible scenario. He'd automatically assumed that the ninjas would do their duty, and the civilians would return to their homes in fear of what was going on. "Kakashi, get back to that compound this instant, and check on Naruto. Do not leave until I relieve you, no matter what happens. Do you understand?" Kakashi quickly nodded before he took to the rooftops, running full pelt towards the compound where he could find his blonde charge. Flashback ends. When he arrived back at the compound, he immediately made to check on the boy. He immediately panicked when he found the empty bedroom, but forced himself to calm down. Forcing chakra into his nose, he heightened his sense of smell. There were a lot of tracks around, nearly too many to find the boy's most recent one. So Kakashi followed the one scent he didn't recognize. The trail wound through the house, turning corners randomly, and sometimes doubling back on themselves. Kakashi had just left the kitchen when he heard a yell, and the sound of breaking wood in the distance. He was off like a shot, nothing more than a blur of color, as he sped through the compound. When he couldn't find a door leading outside, he decided to make one, and barged through the wall, not even pausing as he leapt to the roofs. He followed the bellowed curses of the intruder to the center courtyard. When he landed on the roof surrounding the courtyard, he saw a sight that would haunt him to his dying day. On the ground lay little Uzumaki Naruto, bleeding, broken, and crying as a man Kakashi recognized as Wanryoku Tekari viciously stomped on him repeatedly. Over Wanryoku's foul language, Kakashi could hear Naruto's heart-rending pleas for help. It was Wanryoku's next words that sealed his fate. "Sorry, kid, but believe me when I say you deserve this." White-hot fury flooded Kakashi's veins. To do such things to a child, then say that he deserved it, that was unforgivable. Without even having to form the seals, his prize Raikiri sprung to life in Kakashi's hand, filling the night air with white light and the sound of 1,000 chirping birds. Launching himself off the roof with enough force to destroy the tile, Kakashi flew towards the traitor, who didn't even have time to turn around before the Umbu captain's electrified hand burst through his chest. Kakashi threw aside the man's twitching body, still filled with the millions of volts from his attack, and kneeled beside the young boy. The same boy he had blamed for his sensei's death. What an idiot he'd been. If the boy was the Kyuubi, or even if he was just influenced by it, then Wanryoku wouldn't have gotten in one hit before he was nothing more than a bloody smear on the wall. Kakashi pushed those thoughts away as he checked the boy over. It wasn't looking good. Multiple broken bones, and fractures, as well as internal bleeding, ruptured kidneys, and a bruised spinal cord were just a fist on a long line of serious injuries. Kakashi was sure that any other person would have been dead 5 times over. Gingerly, he picked the boy up, who moaned in pain, even in his unconscious state. Kakashi cursed as he remembered something, and awkwardly formed the seal for Kage Bunshin. A puff of smoke later, and a perfect copy of the copy nin stood beside the original. With instructions to inform the Sandaime of what happened, the clone took off in the direction of the Uchiha district, as Kakashi made for the hospital, careful not to jostle the fragile bundle in his arms any more than possible. And that was how Kakashi came to where he was now, standing outside the operating room as medics fought to save the life of the boy whose safety he'd been charged with. Kakashi shook his head. What the hell had he been thinking? He should have never left his post, or he could have even left a clone, or one of his nin dogs, or sent a clone to find out what was going on, or any one of a multitude of other choices he had. And yet out of all of them, you chose the worst possible one. His conscience told him. He was broken out of his inner chastising as Sarutobi approached. The Hokage marched down the corridor towards him, scattering doctors, nurses, and patients as his robes billowed behind him. One look at his face told Kakashi everything. The Sandaime was beyond pissed. The old man stopped a few feet short of Kakashi, who, despite being several feet taller than the Hokage, felt as if he were cowering before a giant. Sarutobi only stared hard at the Jounin for several minutes. Finally, after what seemed like a small eternity, Sarutobi spoke, his words carrying the full weight of his authority. Kakashi, I am in no mood for any games tonight. Now you will tell me, without omission, everything that happened tonight. You will tell me why a Chunin managed to infiltrate the compound, and why my grandson is lying on a table in the emergency room, fighting for his life. I understand your response to the alarms, as it is standard procedure to abandon all tasks in the event that alarm goes off, but what I don't understand is why you didn't leave any protection for the compound in the forms of clones or summons. If your answers satisfy me, then you may just escape this incident with your rank intact. Kakashi shuddered as he realized how serious the Hokage was. The silver-haired ninja could honestly say he had never seen Sarutobi as angry as he was right now, and Kakashi was trying to figure out his chances of escaping this night with his life, never mind his rank. He immediately began retelling everything that had happened after he left the Uchiha district, making sure to include every single detail, no matter how minute. When he told of what he saw when he arrived in the courtyard, Sarutobi's killing intent spiked violently, dropping many of the staff to their knees, and nearly causing Kakashi to follow suit. After several minutes, Sarutobi finally managed to reel in his anger, and allowed Kakashi to continue his report. He was just wrapping up when a commotion drew their attention to the corridor. If the Hokage was angry, then there were no words to describe the level of fury his daughter was experiencing. It had been Anko who had overheard the clone telling her father that something had happened to Naruto, and that he was at the hospital. Immediately she and Kurenai rushed off to tell Kinom, who had been reading in the Sarutobi family library. When she heard something had happened to her son, she tossed the book aside and made for the door, plans of dismembering Kakashi already forming in her mind. Anko blocked her way, telling her that she shouldn't go out in her state, and that she should wait for word. Barely sparing her a second glance, Kinom grabbed Anko's coat in her fist, and tossed her friend into the chair she had just vacated, and marched out the door, her two friends following, trying to get her to calm down, telling her that the stress wasn't good for the baby. Slowed drastically by her enlarged stomach, she arrived at the hospital far later than she'd liked. After finding out what floor Naruto was on, the trio quickly made their way there, where they saw the Sandaime standing in front of a haggard Kakashi. Kinom marched right up to Kopinin, who had a deeply remorseful and pained look in his eye. Kinom-san, I. Smack. Kakashi's head snapped back as Kinom's fist impacted with his nose, breaking it, and casing blood to soak his mask. She roughly grabbed his vest and pulled him down to her eye level. Kakashi gulped. He was positive that if the flames in Kinom's eyes were ever let loose, then he'd be nothing more than a scorch mark on the ground. Kinom immediately launched into her rant. What the hell happened to my son, Hataki? The killing intent rolled off her in waves, equaling that of her father, and her voice seemed to shake the hospital to its foundations. Kakashi tried to answer, but she wasn't finished. Your job was to protect him at all costs. I thought that for someone with your reputation that shouldn't prove much of a problem, but here I find out that not only has my son been hurt, but also that you weren't even there to protect him. Kakashi could only shake his head. Kinom-san, I don't know what I can say, I'm sorry. Kinom punched him again, something that no one, not even Kakashi, tried to stop. Sorry. Sorry doesn't explain the fact that my child is in the emergency room when he was supposed to be under your care. Kakashi could only hang his head in shame. He was pretty sure nothing he said could give her the answers she was looking for. Kinom sneered in disgust as she shoved the jounin away from her, who slouched against the wizened defeat. Turning away from the group, she began to approach the operating room doors when her father called after her. Kinom, where are you going? Without turning, she replied, to see my son. Where else? Kinom, you can't. The hell I can't, she snarled. Kinom, your water broke. Kinom stopped dead in her tracks. Looking down, she saw that she was indeed entering the first stages of labor. After a few moments, she finally managed a small "oh." Naruto groaned as he finally came round, taking a few seconds to try and get his bearings. After a few seconds of confusion, it all came back to him, and he leapt up with a start, looking around frantically for any signs of the crazed Chunin, Tekuri. To his immense surprise, he didn't see the deranged ninja, but what was even more surprising was his surroundings. He found himself in a cavernous chamber, filled up to his ankles in murky water. The walls were made of cracked concrete, and a few flaming torches provided light. As far as he could see, there was nothing special about the chamber, besides the fact that he had never been here before. All his injuries were gone, and there was no sign of Tekuri. Suddenly the hairs on the back of his neck rose as a deep, thundering growl began to build. Very slowly, he looked over his shoulder, and saw what really made the chamber special. Right behind him, a massive gate stood, the great iron columns that passed for bars being held shut by a large piece of paper with the kanji 4 seal on it. But it was what behind the bars that took his breath away. There, scant meters away from him, stood a gargantuan nine-tailed fox, tails waving wildly behind it as red, hate-filled eyes glowed in the gloom. The thing's tower-sized teeth gleamed, and its razor-like claws dug huge furrows into the ground where they gouged. In his shock, Naruto could only manage the faintest whisper. Kyuubi. With an earth-shattering roar, the demon launched itself at Naruto, its jaws poised to devour the boy's soul completely. Naruto yelled out in fright, falling onto his back as the mammoth fox smashed against the colossal bars separating them. The great beast roared and thrashed, but no matter what, it couldn't break its confinement. With a snarl of frustration, and a final rap against the bars with the tail, the Kyuubi began pacing its cage, its crimson orbs boring into the shivering human before him. "So, you've finally come," the demon stated as it paced. "I thought you were pitiful when I saw your memories, but now that you stand before me I see that I overestimated you. Truly, it's a rare time when I see a creature so worthless." Naruto shook as he stared up at the demon, a demon that nearly destroyed Fire Country on its own. If he ever doubted Tekuri's words before, he had no qualms about accepting them now. This was some pretty damning evidence. The monster's eyes narrowed at the blonde. "What are you gawking at, mortal?" Naruto gulped, and tried to stammer out a response, but the fox cut him off. "To think I'm stuck in something like you," the thing sneered in disgust. "I swear I'll enjoy leveling that infernal village when I'm free." As the ancient demon muttered curses to his village, Naruto managed to get to his feet, and slowly backed away from the creature, careful not to make big movements that would catch the Kyuubi's eye. Unfortunately, the demon had better eyesight than he thought. "Where do you think you're going, boy? I haven't dismissed you." Naruto fell gasping to his knees as the Kyuubi's killing intent washed over him. The oppressive energy seemed to steal away his breath, and wrap itself around his throat, choking him. When the demon finally let up, Naruto fell to all fours, gasping for air. The Kyuubi stopped pacing, and stood in the direct center of the cage, staring at its container as its massive claws dug into the stone ground. It towered over the frightened child, its eyes glowing in the darkness. "Do you know how you came to be here, boy?" Naruto tried to answer, but his throat felt unfathomably parched. "Answer me." Naruto jumped a meter in the air as the demon snapped at him, but allowed him to snap out of his stupor. "I can't remember. The last thing I remember is fighting that Tekuri guy." The fox's eyes narrowed slightly. It snorted. "I should have expected nothing less from a hairless ape. You were attacked, mortal. One of those disgusting creatures that infest that rat's nest you call a village snuck into your home, and attacked you. You were severely injured, but my chakra will take care of that. I expect you will awaken in a few hours, but before then, we have something to speak of. Or rather, I have something you will listen to." Naruto gulped. Nothing about that could be good. The monstrous entity began to pace again. "I watched you during your battle with the human who attacked you. You displayed very little skill, and you allowed yourself to be beaten badly. Despite knowing that you contained a being of such power as myself, that rodent still tried to kill you. It appears that the years have impaired their memory, because they would not have tried to harm you if they remembered that I brought them to their knees with the most minimal of effort." "What are you talking about? I've never been attacked before." Naruto flinched at the glare the Kyuubi sent his way. "Foolish human! You have smelled the evidence of their attempts many times. You may not have realized it, but there have been days when your home reeked of blood. Where do you think that blood came from?" Naruto was confused, and hesitantly asked, "But what happened to them?" "Your mother. She must have killed them during the night, and removed the bodies before you awakened." "Mom K killed them?" Naruto asked in disbelief. He knew that as a ninja, his mother was often forced to take lives, but the thought of her actually doing it. Indeed. She must have been vicious if the scent of all that blood was any indication. Naruto bit his cheek to keep from retorting. Somehow, snapping at a giant demon didn't seem wise. The beast continued, "But without her, you would be dead several dozen times over. That will stop." "What do you mean that will stop? It's not like it's something I can control." Naruto tried not to flinch, but still jumped a little as the fox's tail struck the gates, an angry growl rumbling in its throat. "Don't raise your voice at me, mortal. I have killed for far less, and you would be no exemption." The Kyuubi folded its front paws, and lowered itself to the ground, getting a better view of Naruto. Glaring at the human child, it continued, "You were beaten because you do not commit yourself to your training. You train for short intervals every day when you should throw yourself into it for as long as you can stand. That is the only way that you will survive, and that is what you will do." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the demon, his suspicion raised. What do you mean? Why are you telling me this? I mean, you don't seem like the type of a demon that would care about something like that. The Kyuubi sneered incredulously. Care about you? Do not insult me, human. If I could, I would watch you, and everyone else in this wretched pit burn. It leaned forward slightly. What I do care about is me. I'm the greatest of the tailed ones, a demon lord with no equal. Do you know how insulting it is that, not only was I sealed by a human, into a human, but also that my container is so weak that it can't even defend itself? And to add to an already great insult, the humans of your pitiful village have the gall to attack my vessel, without fear of incurring my wrath. They slight the greatest demon to have ever lived, and feel absolutely no fear in doing so. I will not let this continue. You will not let this continue. The demon growled, a positively repulsive grin worming its way onto its features. Naruto backed away from the cage, a feeling of pure dread forming a knot in his stomach. What can I do? I'm just a kid. The demon chuckled, casing a nauseating feeling to befall Naruto, as if he was going to spew. Oh, you won't have to worry about that, human. The monster began to glow red, crimson mist leaking off its skin, and seemed to worm its way into the walls of the cage. Naruto felt a warming sensation in his stomach. He touched it, wondering what was going on when the feeling began to change from one of slight warmth to a dull pain. He wrapped his arms around his torso as the pain continued to grow, and collapsed to his knees, spewing bile from his mouth. It felt like someone was trying to incinerate him from the inside out. As the pain reached excruciating levels, he drew himself into a shuddering, sweating ball as the Kyuubi's manic laughter resounded off the walls. Kinom grit her teeth as another contraction hit. She had been in the delivery room for hours, and there was still no sign of her second child arriving any time soon. Miracle of birth, my ass! Kinom grumbled in her mind as she flopped back onto the bed, sweat pouring of her. She smiled in thanks as Kurenai wiped the beads from her forehead with a cool cloth. How are you feeling? Her red-eyed friend asked softly. Let's just say that when I get to heaven, Loki won't be able to sit for a while. Maybe even a few years, she said, exhaustion clearly evident in her voice. Kurenai chuckled at her friend, and held up a cup of water for her to drink from. Kinom was thankful for it, and drank her fill, relishing the feel of the cold water running down her parched throat. When the cup was empty, Kurenai set it aside, running a hand through Kinom's hair comfortingly. How's Naruto? The pregnant Sarutobi asked, closing her eyes to try and get a few moments' rest. Your father and Anko are sitting with him now. From what she told me, the doctor says that between their healing and the Kyuubi's regenerative abilities, he should be fine within a few days. Good. Kinom whispered tiredly. Kurenai could see that between labor and worrying about Naruto, she was taxed out. Get some rest, Kinom, you need it. Don't worry about Naruto, he'll be fine. Kurenai prompted gently. Kinom only nodded, and snuggled into her pillow for a few minutes' rest before her next contraction hit. One floor below them, a worried Sarutobi and Anko stood beside the injured blonde's bed. They had sensed a large chakra spike coming from the boy moments before he broke out into a high fever. Immediately they called for the doctor, who rushed in, hands glowing with green chakra as she ran a diagnostic jutsu on him. A few moments later, the doctor stood back, confusion on her face. Well? Sarutobi asked. What's wrong with him? The doctor's mouth opened, then closed silently before she managed to speak. I don't know. High fever, chills, shaking, dilated pupils, clammy skin are all indicative of a nasty infection or flu, but I've never seen anything like this. She glanced warily at the Hokage. Permission to talk about the boy's condition, sir? Sarutobi didn't like this. If the Kyuubi was involved, then there was definitely something wrong. Granted. The doctor took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. Well, it seems that there was a large pulse of chakra originating from inside the seal on his stomach. From the best of my knowledge, it seems that it has introduced some kind of agent, or enzyme into the child's system, and it's multiplying rapidly. Mind translating that for those of us without a PhD? Anko asked as she glanced worriedly at her friend's child. The doctor sighed. It means that it did something to the boy's DNA stands. A small part though it may be, the beast's cage is still a part of Naruto-kun's body, and is therefore connected to the rest of his cells. From what I can tell, the monster has rewritten parts of his DNA, and that the virus, for lack of a better word, is spreading to his other cells. Sarutobi and Anko paled. You mean the Kyuubi is changing his genetic structure? Sarutobi asked weakly. The doctor nodded grimly. Yes. Truth be told, this isn't the first time it has done so. What do you mean? The doctor glanced at the shivering boy in the bed. His whisker marks, his heightened senses, and his rapid regenerative healing abilities for one. From what our tests tell us, along with the files from your personal physician when Naruto-kun lived at the Sarutobi compound, his bones are far denser than those of a normal human. He also has sharper than normal reflexes, a heightened metabolism, a near unbeatable immune system, and his cognitive functions are higher than normal. Basically, the Kyuubi has made sure that Naruto-kun has everything he needs to survive in a harsh environment. I'd say that when his body matures, and the changes fully integrate into his system, he'll be nigh unstoppable. She scoffed slightly. With the regenerative abilities alone, I'd say that nothing short of removing his head, or destroying his body completely would kill him. The two ninja were silent as they processed this. The Kyuubi had been making moves to ensure its survival for years, and they hadn't even noticed. Well, they had noticed, but they never thought anything of it. Sarutobi himself had witnessed the first mutation the Kyuubi had instilled into his grandson moments after it had been sealed, when those accursed marks had been carved into the boy's cheeks. Throughout the years, they had noticed differences in Naruto's body, but hadn't spared a thought that it could have led to problems, as they had only enhanced his body for the better. Now that moment of indecision was coming back to bite them. Do we have any idea what these changes will be? Sarutobi asked, as he rubbed a hand over his tired face, fighting down the grief he felt for the boy. The doctor shook her head. Sadly, no. They could be anything from augments to his already impressive senses, or he could even grow a tail, and fox ears. She said the last part hesitantly. A tail. Both Sarutobi and Anko squawked in unison. That was definitely not news they wanted to hear. There were already elements in the village that wanted Naruto either dead, imprisoned, exiled, or made into a weapon. If they thought that Naruto was actually becoming the Kyuubi. The doctor quickly waved her hands in an attempt to avert their fears. I'm sure it's nothing as drastic as that. Although she sighed. One thing we can be sure of is that this change will be big. None of the other changes the Kyuubi has engineered has caused any of the symptoms Naruto-kun is experiencing now. That can either be because those other changes were implemented over time, or because this change is major. We need to run more tests to be sure of the full extent of the alterations. Sarutobi sighed. Thank you, doctor. Run whatever tests you need, and please tell me of any developments. The doctor left the room with a respectful bow, leaving the two ninja in silence. As they gazed upon the small child, shaking and shivering in the bed, they knew that whatever was happening to him would change his life forever. Naruto didn't know how long he drifted in and out of consciousness. Hell, he didn't know what was real and what was fever-induced hallucination. Things like time, sight, smell, touch, hearing, and even basic things like knowing which way was up ceased to exist as the fever ravaged his body. His eyes were running as his body alternated between scalding flushes and freezing chills. His limbs shook uncontrollably, feeling as heavy as the heaviest lead. His head felt like it was clogged with cement as a powerful migraine pounded away at his mind. Any feelings of hunger or thirst were forgotten as his body tried to fight off whatever was wrong with it. Coupled with a throat as dry as Suna in its hottest months, and a general sense of lethargy, and Naruto, if he had been able to think thoughts, would have likened this to what roadkill must have felt like. If said roadkill was run over multiple times, set on fire, crushed, dragged through a bog, then thrown off a cliff, that is. For God knows how long, he tossed, and turned, curling into a ball of misery, never feeling the nursing staff bath him, change his run their tests, or hear his grandfather's soothing words. When Naruto thought his misery was at its peak, he noticed something moving above him, or what he assumed was above. He managed to raise a shaky hand to try and bat the shadow away, but it avoided his clumsy attempt, turning to another shadow at its side. Dropping his arm back to his side with a groan at having used up so much energy, he closed his eyes, trying to ward off the blinding light piercing his retinas. Numbly, he felt something poke and prod him, prying open his mouth and pulling open his eyes, despite his weak attempts at resistance. Not feeling up to being abused anymore, Naruto drifted off into what had to have been the first peaceful sleep he had since the whole ordeal had started. It was many hours later when Naruto woke again. His eyes opened, only to snap shut at the light shining through the window. Giving his eyes a few moments to adjust, he gently opened them again, the light no longer boring into his brain. By the look of the light outside, he'd say that it was late morning, maybe 11 a.m. Still feeling weak, he managed to push himself onto his back with a groan, wincing as he felt his parched throat. Feeling around with his hands, he managed to find and pressed the nurse call button and waited. He didn't have to wait long before his very relieved-looking grandfather swept into the room, a female doctor following swiftly behind. "Naruto!" the old man exclaimed. "Thank God you've been out for a while, we were worried." "Gigi?" Naruto croaked. The doctor must have seen his predicament, and handed him a glass of cold water, which he gulped down greedily, draining it in seconds. He handed the glass back with a smile of thanks. What happened? The doctor busied herself checking Naruto, which he numbly went along with, as his grandfather answered him. You contracted some sort of virus. You developed a high fever, and drifted in and out of consciousness. They had to hook you up to N4 to replace your fluids as well. You've been out for just under 3 days. He hesitated. Do you remember what happened after you lost consciousness? Naruto placed a confused hand to his head, trying to sort through the jumble that was his memories for the past few days, when he froze, his stomach dropping away in dread. Kekkei. Sarutobi sighed. It seemed that Naruto did recall what happened after all. Naruto, I'm so sorry. I had assigned a guard to protect you, but there was an emergency, and he left his post. I thought that you would be safe until your mother returned, but obviously you weren't. Naruto waved a tired hand, cutting off any further apologies. It's not your fault, Gigi. I know you would have tried to provide the best protection you could. Sarutobi smiled at that. Thank you, Naruto. I truly am sorry though. What happened to him? Naruto had to know. Your guard returned, and subdued him before bringing you to the hospital. He's dead, isn't he? Naruto asked, smirking humorlessly when he saw his grandfather wince and look away. I thought so. So it was telling the truth after all. He said it more to himself. Sarutobi was confused. What are you talking about, Naruto? What was telling the truth? Naruto's dulled blue eyes locked with Sarutobi's concerned browns. Kyuubi. Sarutobi turned white, his jaw falling open as the shock hit him. Naruto knew. He feared that would be the case after someone penetrated the defenses of the compound, but he'd always held a small hope that Naruto hadn't found out his secret, not without his family there to explain things to him. With someone as prejudicial as the Chunin who attacked him, Naruto would have got a very one-sided explanation. Sarutobi sighed resignedly. So Ryoka told you. He told you what you contain. Naruto laughed, and Sarutobi winced at the sound. It was so hollow, so unlike the joyous sound he knew. Still laughing slightly, Naruto stared at his grandfather with a mix of pain, anger, and hopelessness. Not just that. I met the legendary demon in person. Sarutobi's breath caught in his throat, and he managed to turn an even paler white. You what? He whispered, not wanting to believe what he was hearing. Naruto nodded. Yep, met it in all its tailed glory. Doesn't like me too much though. Seems to think I'm worthless, and such. He said as if talking about someone he met at the academy on his first day. His forced smirk vanished, and when he spoke it was with anger and pain. Why didn't you tell me, Gigi? Sarutobi sighed, and sat himself in the chair beside the boy's bed. The doctor saw that this was going to be a very private moment, and quietly left the room, either of the other two acknowledging her departure. The Hokage took off his hat, and scratched his balding head. We promised to tell you in a few months before you entered the academy, and we weren't going to break our promise. We just wanted you to have a few years without having to worry about demons, possible attacks, and such things. We wanted you to have a normal life. Naruto looked down sadly. But I didn't, did I? I was never allowed outside, never got a chance to make friends, or even allowed to go with Mom when she had to go live at the old compound. I am sorry, Naruto, but we thought that if you knew, you would become bitter and resentful towards the village, especially with the restrictions we placed on you. Naruto was silent, so Sarutobi carried on. Maybe things would have been better if we had told you earlier, maybe not. We'll never know. All I can say is that I'm terribly sorry that you had to find out this way. It's ironic, really. We didn't want you to leave the compound in case someone with a grudge told you of your burden, yet one did, inside the very compound we tried to hide you in. Mather laughed at the twist of fate. They just sat in silence, each absorbed in their thoughts. After a few moments, Naruto spoke. Was Kekkei telling the truth? Am I the Kyuubi? He asked, a hint of desperation in his words. He needed to know. Sarutobi flew out of his chair, and grasped his grandson by the shoulders. The look in his eyes was one of complete and utter sincerity. No! You are not, never have, and never will be the Kyuubi. You, Naruto, are its container, its prison. You keep every soul in this village alive just by existing. Everyone who calls Konoha home owes you a great debt for this, a debt that we may never be able to repay. Naruto glanced up at his grandfather, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Really? Sarutobi didn't speak, but lifted the front of Naruto's t-shirt, and pressed his hand to the boy's stomach, forcing chakra through his palm. Slowly, a seal appeared. Naruto looked at his stomach in amazement as his grandfather spoke. This is the proof. This seal keeps the Kyuubi bound inside you. It was designed so that, over time, its chakra would assimilate with yours, thereby destroying the monster forever. You are Naruto, this is the Kyuubi, he said vehemently. Naruto couldn't help it. Tears came to his eyes, and seeing them, Sarutobi pulled the boy into a tight embrace. The blonde had been filled with doubts and fears that he was the monster, and that he was only kept in the compound to keep him from the populace for their safety. For well over an hour, Sarutobi held Naruto as he cried, letting the boy let out his pain and not only the truth of the Kyuubi, but of the pain of what he went through during the attack. When his tears finally stopped, he glanced up at Sarutobi, who lessened his hold, but didn't let go. So, what really happened then? If you were going to tell me, then there's not time like the present. So he did. For the next hour, Sarutobi retold the story of the Kyuubi attack, and of the Yandame's plan to seal it at the cost of his own life, and that the Yandame trusted Naruto to hold, and eventually kill the beast, something that not even the Yellow Flash himself couldn't do. He explained all the intricacies of the Shiki Fujin, and of what he could expect to gain from the absorption. When Sarutobi finished, there was a knock at the door, and he rose to answer it. When he saw who it was, he smiled, and called over to Naruto, his robed form blocking the view of the door. "Oh, Naruto? I think there's someone who wishes to see you." Naruto looked up at Sarutobi, confused, until the old man stepped aside, causing Naruto's jaw to drop. There in the doorway was his mother, but not as he was now used to. She was slender once more, as she had been before she became pregnant, her face filled with happiness. She was clad in her pink robe, and yet seemed to glow, but this wasn't the cause of Naruto's stupefied look. Held tenderly in her arms was a baby. It was wrapped in a thick, soft blanket, and Naruto could see its chubby little arms waving around, trying to reach his mother's face. Naruto sat in shock as she walked to his bed, sitting in Sarutobi's vacant seat, smiling at Naruto's gobsmacked expression. Is he that he could only manage, pointing a shaky finger at the small bundle. Kinome laughed lightly at her son's expression before answering. "Naruto, I'd like you to meet your little brother, Konohamaru." "A little brother?" Naruto stuttered, unable to believe what he was hearing. Kinome nodded. "Would you like to hold him?" Naruto nodded hesitantly, and Kinome gently placed the babe in his arms, showing him the correct way to hold him. Naruto looked down at the baby's face. The face of his little brother. His skin was still a little pink, but he had the same mop of brown fuzz as their mom, but had dark brown eyes with a black pupil, unlike their mother. The baby smiled a toothless smile, and giggled madly as he reached for his big brother's face. Naruto felt a smile creep its way onto his chest, and held out a finger for him to grab, which the baby promptly put in his mouth. Naruto laughed softly at his little brother's antics. "Hey, Ko!" Naruto near whispered, feeling the pain of the last few hours wash away, replaced by a feeling of love and warmth. The kind that only family could provide. Sarutobi sat in his office later that night, waiting for certain individuals to arrive. For the umpteenth time, he checked the plans he concocted for any flaws, and for the umpteenth time he found none. His plan was perfect. Nodding, he placed the scroll aside, when there was a knock at the door. "Enter." The door swung open to admit the people who would bring his plan to completion. Marino Ibiki, his head of interrogation, Mitarashi Enko, Ibiki's protege, and future successor, and Hatake Kakashi, a man who would most likely become a resident of the local graveyard when Kinome finally got out of hospital, all walked in single file, and stood before his desk. Sarutobi silently regarded them for a moment before speaking. "I have no wish to waste time with this issue, so I'll be blunt. You three will be in charge of a wide-scale investigation, one made for the express purpose of rooting out all groups in the village who would see harm done to one Uzumaki Naruto, the vessel of the Kyuubi. Enko, Kakashi, I know you are already aware of Naruto's past, and the attempts on his life, but Ibiki, you are in the dark. Here." Sarutobi handed the scared mental expert a thick folder. That contained all the info about Naruto's past, and a record of all assassination attempts. "To bring you up to speed, for the past 7 years, my daughter has been raising Naruto inside the old Hitorai compound. At some point his whereabouts was discovered, and a few days later a group of ninja penetrated the compound in an attempt to kill Naruto. Fortunately Kinome killed them, but the secret was out, and the damage done. Several vigilante groups have plotted his death, but have had no luck. These groups stay underground for fear of being found out and arrested. For years Kinome has had the authority to kill any stranger who enters the compound, and has done so. When she became pregnant, she moved back into the Sarutobi compound, but Naruto couldn't follow, so he was left in the care of Kakashi. When Itachi massacred his clan, Kakashi responded to the alarm, but didn't notice the ninja who entered the compound. Sarutobi's voice became cold. The ninja beat Naruto to within an inch of his life before Kakashi returned, killed him, and rushed Naruto to the hospital where he received treatment. It was only by sheer luck that this has only happened one time, but it will not happen again. I expect that you have a plan? Ibiki's deep baritone asked, as he flipped through Naruto's thick file. Sarutobi nodded, and passed the scroll to the three jounin, who crowded around it. Upon seeing its contents, their eyebrows rose. It was a good plan. Sarutobi explained, you three will lead an operation to find and neutralize these groups. The operation will be in 3 parts. Enko will lead a few teams of infiltration specialists, whose primary duty is to find and gain access to these meetings, gathering as much info as you can. Things like names, times, and plans will be what you're looking for. Enko nodded at her role. He turned to Kakashi. Kakashi, your main job will be leading several strike teams. You will coordinate with Enko to find out the best times to catch as many members of these groups at once, while rounding up any stragglers as quietly as possible. You need to be quick and quiet. If anyone hears of what you're doing, it could cause the targets to go to ground, making locating them difficult. I'm trusting you with this, Hataki. Mess this up, and the repercussions will be most dire. Sarutobi warned. He didn't really want to use Kakashi, but the man was renowned for his sneaky ways, which had better be much better than his bodyguarding ones. Finally, he turned to Ibiki. And you will do what you do best. You will interrogate all the targets Enko and Kakashi bring in, and feed them any information you can glean from the prisoners. These are traitors, Ibiki. Use whatever force necessary. The Hokage said coldly. He would lose no sleep over the hell those who would harm his grandson would go through. Making sure they all understood their duties, Sarutobi sat them down to discuss strategies, personnel, equipment, and all the other things they would need to rid Konoha of these people. They will never harm you again, Naruto. Sarutobi thought. This I promise. Naruto lay in his hospital bed, trying to get some sleep, but to no avail. He was used to the silence of the compound, where the only thing you heard at night was your own breath, and the irritating buzz of the odd cricket. The hospital, though, was like trying to get some sleep during the day, in the center of a busy town square to him. Constantly, he heard nurses passing the door with trolleys, doctors talking about their patients, or the voice over the speaker telling Dr. Whoever to report to Ward Watch McCallet. To put it bluntly, it was maddening. Not only that, but Naruto couldn't help but feel a little insecure here. He was out of his element. He was used to a soft, round mattress, not this thick thing the hospitals used. Plus the food was terrible, and he didn't know anyone. The hospital, he decided, was a place he didn't like. He sighed, pulling the covers over his head. It was funny. It was the first time he had been outside the compound, and yet he couldn't wait to get home. Talk about irony. It seemed his life was full of it lately. Naruto felt his eyelids grow heavy, and yawned as the sounds of the hospital faded away, drifting into sleep. He ran. Down endless dark corridors he ran. Something was after him. He knew it. He felt it. He could hear its slow steps, always right behind him, no matter how fast he ran. He could feel the thing's arms snatching for him, inches from touching him. He could feel its hot breath running down the back of his neck, agitating the hairs that stood on end. He didn't even know what he was running from, only that it was evil, and that he did not want it to catch him. Fear boosted his speed in a primal attempt at survival, as a cold feeling of pure dread slowly clawed at his insides, turning his blood to ice. His heart thundered in his chest as the presence closed in, getting closer and closer. His tear-filled eyes widened when he heard the sound of metal scraping on metal, and he pumped his legs even harder, his breath coming in short, wheezy pants. An evil laugh echoed through the empty corridors. It moved quicker, closing in fast. Naruto cried out for help, but none came, not before his hunter pounced. Naruto felt it slam into his back, and he screamed for help as he was forced to the ground. The thing's shrill laugh sounded in his ears, as Naruto felt something sharp plunge into his back. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he flung himself up with a scream on his lips, only to freeze in horror, his eyes wide. Standing at the bottom of his bed, staring at him silently, was the corpse of Onryo Katekuri, bloody and battered, his empty eye glaring menacingly as he raised his kunai high. Naruto screamed. Naruto threw himself out of the bed, a second before the kunai tore into the pillow, scattering feathers all over the place. He landed on the cold floor awkwardly, and painfully, still sore from his injuries. He looked up to see Tekuri, or what used to be Tekuri, pull his kunai from the remains of the bed, breathing raggedly. He turned to glare at the boy, a crazed look in his eye. You! He rasped, pointing a thick finger at the terrified boy. You did this to me! He raged, gesturing wildly to his mangled body. I died because of you. Demon! Naruto shook wildly, still unable to believe that his tormentor had come back from the grave to kill him. I'm sorry! He cried, unable to think of anything else to say. I'm sorry! Sorry isn't good enough. The walking corpse raged. You killed me, killed all those innocent people. I'll kill you! He lunged for the boy, kunai ready to split his skull in twain. Suddenly the door was blown off its hinges, sending splinters flying through the air like wooden samban. Light flooded into the darkened room, momentarily blinding the two occupants, causing Kekkei to stumble in his attack. Standing in the doorway, Kurenai could only gape at the scene before her. If she hadn't been so shocked, she'd have been freaking out. She had seen Wanryoku Tekkei's body with her own eyes, and saw the large, fist-sized hole where his heart should have been, proof of the deadliness of the Raikiri. She didn't get much time to think on it, though, before Kekkei lunged at his latest target with a feral snarl. Thinking fast, Kurenai whipped out a kunai, and ducked under the deceased Chunan's clumsy swing before burying her knife deep into his gut, and pulling it lengthwise, opening his intestines to the world. Tekkei's eyes widened, and a strangled gasp came from his lips, before he burst into a cloud of inky black smoke. What? Kurenai brought her kunai close, ready to defend herself from any attack, as her crimson eyes scanned the room, her ears straining to pick up the slightest hint of movement. After a full minute of silence, Kurenai slowly sheathed her kunai, still alert for any ambush. A whimper drew her attention, and her head snapped round to see Naruto huddled in the corner, shaking furiously. She rushed over to the distraught blonde, and reached out a hand to touch his shoulder, but he flinched back with a yelp of fear. Deciding to try and calm him, Kurenai spoke with her most gentle and reassuring tone. Naruto? She asked softly, trying to catch his eye. Naruto, my name's Kurenai. I'm a friend of your mother. Are you okay? No answer, just more heart-wrenching sobs. She was about to try another tactic when a commotion out in the corridor drew her attention. Thinking it was another attack, Kurenai drew her kunai and stepped in front of Naruto, but relaxed when she saw who it was. Kinom, wrapped in her hastily tied robe, rushed into the hospital room, looking frantic. Kurenai, what happened? I heard it was then she noticed the state of her son. Naruto! Said child looked up, and saw his mother kneeling in front of him. Immediately he threw himself at her, crying uncontrollably. Kinom wrapped her son in a tight hug, whispering condolences in his ear, and rocking him back and forth. Naruto's entire frame rocked with sobs as his mother tried to calm him. He didn't want to cry, but he couldn't help it. He knew he needed to be stronger, both physically and emotionally if he wanted to be a ninja, but it was hard. For nearly an hour Naruto cried in Kinom's arms, in which time Kurenai went to retrieve Sarutobi from his office. Naruto sat on his ruined bed, Kinom's arm wrapped firmly around his shoulder. He was shivering, but he wasn't cold. For whatever reason, he just wouldn't stop shaking. Naruto? Sarutobi asked gently. Can you tell us what happened? Naruto heaved a shuddering sigh. I don't really know, Gigi. I was sleeping. I was having this really creepy nightmare too. When I woke up, I just saw him standing there, with his kunai in his hand. I screamed, and threw myself out of the bed, and he missed me. He started ranting, saying that Ik killed him, and all those people during the Kyuubi attack. He was saying that he was going to kill me too, and that's when that lady with the red eyes broke down the door. He went for her, and she ducked under him. I think she might have pulled a kunai. Suddenly he gasped, and disappeared. Naruto looked up at his grandfather, confusion and fear in his eyes. What's going on, Gigi? I thought he was dead. Sarutobi could only shrug uncomfortably. I really don't understand it, Naruto. From what Kurenai-san tells me, it may have been a Kage Bunshin, but no Bunshin I've ever heard of produces black smoke. I've sent someone to check, and Tekkei's body was destroyed hours ago, so it can't have been him. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. That had been one of the scariest experiences of his life. The thought of someone coming back from the dead, just to kill him, was just too much to process. But his heart sank. Did this mean that someone else was out to get him, and just used Tekkei's image to scare him? Naruto buried his face in his hands and sighed. This was without a doubt the most stressful week of his life. Sarutobi patted Naruto comfortingly on the shoulder. Don't worry, Naruto, we'll get to the bottom of this. I promise. Naruto smiled weakly. Thanks, Gigi. Sarutobi nodded, then became serious once more. Just so I know, what was your nightmare about? Naruto frowned, confused. Oh well, I was being chased. I think I was in the compound. Yeah, I was being chased through the corridors of the compound, but no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't get away. Whoever was chasing me caught me, and pushed me to the ground. I heard this creepy laugh, then I think he stabbed me in the back, and I woke up. He? Sarutobi asked. Who's he? Naruto shifted uncomfortably. Well, I don't know for sure, but I think the person that was chasing me was Kekkei. It just reminded me so much of that night. Naruto shuddered. I can't be positive, but I'm pretty sure that Kekkei was chasing me. Sarutobi hemmed in thought. Naruto had been having a nightmare about that night at the compound, then he wakes up, and Kekkei's there trying to kill him. Could this mean? Sarutobi's eyes widened. Of course. That must have been it. Oh, that fox was one crafty bastard. Of course it would want people to fear Naruto, and by extension it itself. Being attacked by a human must have not sat well with the almighty Bijou. Naruto, Sarutobi began slowly, a contemplative tone in his voice. I think I may have a clue as to what is going on here, but we'll have to do some tests to make sure. They may take a few days, but by the end we should know what we're dealing with. Kinom looked at the old man quizzically. Father? What are you talking about? Sarutobi stroked his beard and thought. I'll tell you when I know more. For now, Naruto, I want you to get as much rest as you can, and if you have any more nightmares, tell me. I'll post an umbu at the door, just in case. For now, I should go, and get things prepared. With that, Sarutobi strode out of the room, his robes swishing behind him. The other two members of his family stared at the door in confusion for a few seconds more, before Naruto looked up at Kinom. What was that all about? Kinom's brow furrowed a little as she pondered her father's strange behavior. I'm not sure. Let me go and check. Will you be okay on your own for a few minutes? Naruto paled a little, but gave a brave, if shaky, nod. Kinom smiled, and kissed his forehead, before getting up, and rushing after her father. She caught up to him just as he was getting into the elevator, and grabbed his sleeve to halt his progress. Not giving him a chance to protest, she dragged him into a corner, and rounded on him. Okay, what was that all about? What tests, and what is going on with Naruto? Her voice held that tone that only women could achieve, one that all men knew meant that if satisfactory answers were not given, pointy things would be introduced to sensitive areas. Sarutobi scratched the back of his neck. Truth be told, he should tell Kinom what he thought was going on, he just didn't want to worry her. But knowing her, she would worry even more if she didn't have all the information. He sighed, and began telling her of his thoughts on what was happening, and of what he planned to do about it. By the end, Kinom was as white as a ghost. If what her father said was true, then she didn't want to think what that could mean for Naruto. She prayed her father was wrong. Naruto had already suffered enough. After talking on the matter for a few more moments, Kinom and Sarutobi parted, each going to their respective duties. Kinom entered the room just as a nurse finished changing the bed, replacing the ruined pillow and covers. A quiet Naruto sat huddled in one of the chairs, just watching the nurse go about her work. When the nurse left, Kinom sat on the bed, allowing Naruto to curl up next to her, soaking in her touch. She sang softly to him, like she did when he was little, and watched carefully as his lids began to close. If what her father said was true, then they were in for a long night. Sarutobi sat in the dojo of the Uzumaki compound, as Naruto's home had become known as. Before him lay several medical reports, seal guides, bloodline analysis reports, brain wave scans, and a multitude of other reports he had gathered in connection to Naruto's condition. From scrolls of long-extinct bloodlines, to jutsu theory scrolls, Sarutobi had dug through mounds of old work to find some way to help his grandson. And he thought he may have just found something. Right now, he was just waiting on Kinom and Naruto. They had returned from the hospital a few days prior, along with an excited Konohamaru. With the anti-Naruto groups being rounded up, neither Sarutobi nor Kinom saw any reason not to bring Konohamaru with them. Each day, more and more people were rounded up by Kakashi's strike teams, and handed over to Ibiki. With liberal application of force, they spilled all their plans for killing Naruto, and gave up many more names. These traitors were then immediately sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison, many without a chance of parole. For those few who managed to get out, Sarutobi had issued immediate orders for them to be exiled from Fire Country, with the promise of execution should they return. Then there were a few of the more fanatical leaders who cared not for any prison time, and tried to tell everyone in the village of the threat of the demon, without any regard to the secrecy law Sarutobi placed on Naruto's condition. Many of these fanatics went missing en route to prison, with no sign of any bodies. They were assumed dead, and no one batted an eye. That didn't mean that they were taking chances though. Sarutobi had two of Kakashi's strike teams patrolling the blocks around the compound at all times, not that they were really needed when Kinom had such good friends as she did. Kurenai, and whenever she could, Anko would often spend time around the compound, talking with Kinnome, playing with Konohamaru, or slowly getting to know Naruto, something that Kinnome encouraged greatly. He was still a bit wary of strangers, understandable considering his first experience with one, but he was slowly starting to open up to them more. Especially when they told him stories of his mom when she was younger. His mom's friends were a goldmine of blackmail material. Hearing the door slide open, Sarutobi looked up to see the very two people he had just been thinking about enter the dojo. Kinnome was again wearing her ninja uniform, once more in the condition she was in before her pregnancy started. If you didn't know her, you would have never have guessed that she had a kid. Naruto, on the other hand. The boy looked dreadful. Ever since the night of the fake Takuri's attack, he hadn't gotten much sleep. Every time he tried, he would wake screaming from horrid nightmares, never getting more than a few minutes of rest at a time. Dark rings had started to form around his eyes, and his face was drawn and tired. Even his hair seemed to lose some of its natural spring. He staggered every few steps, his eyes closing of their own violation before he managed to pry them open again, but not being able to focus on anything at all. Coupled with his slouched frame and dragging feet, his entire being screamed exhaustion. "Hello, Naruto," Sarutobi greeted gently, as Kinnome helped the boy onto one of the sitting mats, wrapping a secure arm around him to prevent him from tipping over. Naruto could only manage a tired HN, straining his already taxed eyes to try and focus on his grandfather. Sarutobi looked hard at the folder in his hands as he collected his thoughts before finally looking up at his sleep-deprived grandson and his concerned daughter. "Naruto, I think I may have some answers as to what happened at the hospital. I'm not sure if you are aware, but while you were ill, the Kyuubi did some improving with your genetic structure." Naruto blinked slowly as the words made their way through his mind. "Improving?" he asked, his voice a tired rasp. Sarutobi nodded. "Yes. It seemed that it has had the ability to do this for a long time, and has done so by making your body more resilient, and your senses sharper. It has most likely done this to prolong its survival for as long as it can." "What did it do?" "It seems to have altered your DNA to create what we believe is a new bloodline. We weren't sure what this bloodline was at first, but after what happened in the hospital, I believe I have discovered what it does. We just need to run a few more tests to be sure." Despite his fatigued state, Naruto couldn't help but groan, causing the older two to smile at the glimmer of Naruto's usual self. Sarutobi patted the boy on the head, ignoring the weak swipe of the blonde's hand. Now, Naruto. It won't be so bad. They shouldn't take more than an hour if we're lucky." Naruto sighed. When his grandfather was sure of a new discovery, he was nearly as stubborn as he himself was. "What do I have to do?" Sarutobi motioned for them all to stand, something Naruto needed a little help with, and cleared his throat, going into what he called teacher mode. "Now, Naruto, do you know the theory behind performing the Kage Bunshin Jutsu?" Unable to see where this was going, Naruto just answered. "Yeah, you perform the hand seal, mold the chakra, then picture in your mind what your clones will look like, and how many you want." Sarutobi nodded. "Correct. Now, why can't the caster create perfect clones of someone else? Why do they need to have their clones perform henge?" Without hesitation, Naruto answered, because each person's chakra is different in some way. The Kage Bunshin uses the caster's chakra to create a perfect copy of the caster. If a person wants their clone to take on the appearance of another person, the clone needs to use henge, but this has its drawbacks, because henge is just an illusion. It can't change the shape, height, weight, or any other part of the clone's form. Sarutobi nodded again, happy to see that Naruto had been paying attention to his studies. "Very good. With this in mind, I think we can see just what this bloodline of yours can do. Now come here." Sarutobi led Naruto to the center of the dojo, while Kinnome watched from the sides. When he was sure he had Naruto's complete attention, Sarutobi pressed his palms together, his fingers pointing directly up, as if he were praying. "This, Naruto, is what's known as the Universal Hand Seal, or sometimes the Infinity Seal. This seal is compatible with every type of jutsu there is, and is only used by those who have mastered a chakra element. For instance, my sensei, the Nidaime Hokage, could use this one seal, and create powerful Suiton jutsu from thin air without having to run through the long chain of hand seals the jutsu would normally require. Since we have no clue as to unlock your abilities, we'll need to start from scratch. Now, mold this seal, and familiarize yourself with the chakra movement." While Naruto did that, Sarutobi retrieved something from one of the folders before going back to stand in front of Naruto. When Naruto was sure he was familiar with the chakra movement, he looked up at his grandfather. "Got it, Gigi? Good. Now, bearing in mind the theory on how to create Kage Bunshin, I want you to use the Universal Seal to create this." He handed the boy a photograph. Naruto looked at it for a moment before looking back at Sarutobi incuriously. But that's impossible. I mean, I can't make a clone like that. Sarutobi placed his hands on the boy's shoulders, looking at him seriously. Naruto, you must. You need to learn how to control your abilities, especially if they work how I think they do. Naruto sighed in defeat. Fine. He grumped petulantly. With mild hesitation, he formed the seal, and began to channel his chakra, just like he did with the Kage Bunshin. Sarutobi and Kinnome watched as the boy struggled, focusing with all his might to do as Sarutobi asked. In the back of his mind, Naruto was grumbling about how this would never work when he felt something. Heart beating faster in excitement, he pushed a little harder when he felt a pulse in his chakra. Suddenly there was a puff of black smoke in front of him, catching his attention. The smoke hung in the air for a moment before dissolving to reveal a skeleton. A fully grown male skeleton, to be precise. Sarutobi smiled in triumph, and went to inspect Naruto's creation, while Kinnome looked on in confusion. That's it? She asked, slightly disappointed. All that trouble, and the fox only gave you the ability to create clones that come equipped with a henge. Seeing Naruto's downcast face, she quickly reiterated. Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of your achievement, Naruto, but I can't see how this will be much help. Her father's chuckle drew her attention to where he was standing in front of the skeleton, which was regarding him silently. He turned to Kinnome, his eyes twinkling with mirth. Don't be so sure, daughter. What are you talking about, Fath? What the hell? Kinnome's jaw hit the floor when her father stuck his hand up under the skeleton's ribcage, and waved it about, completely without resistance. Naruto was as surprised as his mother, not being able to believe his eyes. Sarutobi smiled at their gobsmacked expressions. Well, Naruto, give it a command. Naruto looked up at his creation, feeling slightly silly. Sit down? The skeleton immediately complied, and sat silently. Not that it could have made a sound anyway.